that board members have asked so that we can move forward. We'll start, Bill, I'm going to be starting with you, so you're going to want to unmute your line. And Bill, I'm going to ask you to begin by talking about the survey and the use of the survey potentially in lieu of citizens forums, and then we'll move to the next item.
Andrea,
Wait a second.
make sure I'm unmuted here.
You are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, you can. Okay, thank you very much. We had a tremendous response on the survey. And prior to now, the board, the superintendent decided to go ahead and postpone our community and staff forums. But since we've had such a large response on the survey, our thoughts were, and we need board direction, if we can utilize the responses to determine the qualities so we can move forward with the process. The reason that we needed the community input was to determine what qualities the board would like to include in the brochure and would like to utilize when the Citizens Committee and the board makes their final decision on the superintendent. We want to try to match up the qualities with the applicants. One thing that we did is once we received the survey information, we sent the board a list of 17 qualities, draft qualities, that when we reviewed the results from the surveys, we thought the board might want to consider. I also used the input from your last brochure, the qualities that you did on the last survey, the last time we had the search, and also I used information that I received during our conversation at our pre-search interview. So the request is, first of all, is the board satisfied with utilizing the results of the survey in place of the face-to-face community and staff forums? That's the first decision we need to have made.
Want to hold there, Bill, while we talk?
Yes, ma'am.
That question?
Yeah.
Okay, Bridget? Bridget?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
All right. So, I thank you, Bill, and thank you, Andrea, for joining. I think we're in unique times, and so having to pivot, and we don't have any trajectory as far as how long we'll be in this and where we could actually potentially have in-person community input. I think it's outstanding the amount we had. I find myself more flexible on that component of it because, again, we don't know how long this duration is. I had the opportunity to read through it. I think that encompassing additional discussions, I'm not opposed to utilizing that as our community input, but again, there's a lot of other moving parts that we want to discuss. But like I said, and I know I mentioned this to Bill, that's not something that, because I don't know how soon we would be able to have an in-person public forum, a virtual forum or online survey is something that I would be okay with at this point. Again, there's a number of other areas, but for right now, that's not something that I'm steadfast drawing a line on the sand, if that makes sense.
Shirley? Mute yourself, Bridget.
Pardon me?
You're good. You're good. Shirley, go ahead.
The questionnaires, could you tell us how many came in?
Yes, we had over 5,000 from the community and about 4,800 plus from the staff, but the number changed regarding every question. Some people might not have answered every question, but it's the largest response that we've ever had doing any surveying.
Yeah.
And we provided the board members with all of that information.
I think that's probably more of a response than you would have gotten, for the community input anyway, and that's what we want. We want community input. So I think the online surveys did their job. So I'm happy with them. We go forward.
Thank you. Jane?
I'm really happy with the results as well. I've never known over 9,000 results from a survey online. So I read through them. A lot of them had recurring themes, and I think that would suffice for me in terms of this portion of the search.
Thank you, Jane. Eric?
Yeah, given the uncertain times,
Their
hold on. Me
feedback.
and Shirley having a little technical difficulty. Shirley and I are in the same room, so we're hearing reverberation. We're good? Yeah, so given the uncertain times, I think being able to do an online survey, given the situation, is the best that we can hope for. So we all need to be flexible, like Ms. Ziegler said, and so given the circumstances, this is the best we can hope for.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, Dr. Vogel, could you begin?
Yes, ma'am. So therefore, I'm hearing a consensus that we're fine with these, with the survey results. The next, and thank you very much. Next, I provided the board, after reviewing those results, as I said, with a list of 17 qualities. And the board members all have those. And what I'd like to do there is ask board members to go through those qualities that are proposed as a draft, and maybe within about a week, if you could go ahead and board members edit those. I know at least on one or more, I might have been repetitious, but if you could look at those and maybe wordsmith them any way the board would like, get that information to Mitzi and Mrs. Tompkins, and then we could finalize the list of those qualities that we would include in the brochure, and then they will also form the basis for questions that we develop for board consideration throughout the entire process. We feel those qualities are pretty important. This is about the same number you had in the last brochure. So that would be my request at this point. Of course, seeing if the board would agree with that, and that would keep our process moving forward.
Okay, Bridget?
As far as reviewing them as a timeline, and what direction are you looking for?
I would ask that you take about a week to look at them,
Okay.
if you would, and then give any input to Mrs. Tompkins, and then Mitzi or one of her team can kind of consolidate those, and then have a finalized list that we would use for the brochure, and so we can continue our process. Do you think a week is enough for that?
Yeah, I'm fine with the timeline. I think the only question forgive me if we've discussed this, and I can't recall where we landed as a board, was some of those topics was on the personality test, because so many of them are personality driven versus specific from a qualification standpoint. I know Mr. Hardy had provided us some an opinion. I don't know if it was a formal legal opinion. I know Mr. Hardy, you're on here, but and it's been some time since we addressed that. Is that something we will be discussing? Because I think they go hand in hand as far as what those qualities are. I think I read through them. I think they're great. And I think that timeline's great, but I wanted to get a sense of where we were as far as the personality test or evaluation. Or
We were planning on talking about that.
okay, I don't want to go out of order. Nope. So
Right,
timeline,
before
I'm
that.
fine with that. Yep.
Bill, Bill, hold on, Bill.
We didn't get past
Bill-
the timeline.
Bill,
Right,
hold on.
yes.
Shirley,
Okay, we can't.
unmute.
She has to press that button next to her.
Unmute, Shirley. You're muted. You're muted.
But she doesn't.
Okay.
look like-
Is somebody compiling that list for us and showing us what they've said, you know, what the community said, what the staff said, what their top ones are? Or do we go through all 10,000 of them?
Yes.
We have a list that was sent to us. It prints out to 53 pages.
Well, that's what I'm
those-
saying. Do I have to go through 53 pages or has somebody compiled it for me?
So Shirley,
Bill's it
just
with the
really
draft.
quickly, is that the top 4 on the questions that were pick your top 4, those are there for you. Everything else
Okay.
that's in there afterwards
All
are
right, fine.
just open-ended comments. So you can't really compile individual comments. So
Okay,
that's
thank
why.
you.
Uh-huh.
Jane?
I'm fine with it. I've reviewed the 17 and I don't have any problems with getting back in a week's time.
Eric? Eric?
Yeah, I'm fine and flexible with whatever you guys want to do, but I agree, if we're going to have subjective criteria, then we need to have some sort of personality evaluation. How is she supposed to know that these people fit this evaluation? I mean, if you want somebody who has certain personality traits, then although it's not exact, it's, you know, having some sort of personal evaluation. And I know Mr. Hardy said about it being public, but I think Todd Bowden, a previous superintendent, took 2 personality tests while he was with us. One was a retreat that we had at the Community Foundation, and another one was a retreat, FSBA Mastership Board training class that we had at the Chamber. So it's not without its precedence having the superintendent, and all the board members took those tests too. So it's not without its precedence, and I think it's helpful in during this process.
So what we're voting on right now is whether or not to do a personality test instead of a question that you asked before, Bill.
No, I think everyone has consensus as far as the, you know, well, we just for the qualifications to take the list of 17. And Andrea had asked, would next Tuesday at noon be a good time for a deadline to provide that to myself and Kathy?
I would
For
say
us to get
yes.
that to them. And if
Bridget
you
says
just
yes, I can see
nod your
that.
head.
Nod your head if it's yes.
Then we're good. Perfect. Okay, good. So that
can't
takes
mute
care
my-
of that one. I'm sorry, Jane.
I can't mute.
Oh, there it goes. There she goes. So, so yeah, I think as long as we go to that, and then we can go on to the next
Okay.
item. Because I know Bill had some things he was going to discuss.
Correct. We're going to continue through our list, and thank you very much. I appreciate the consensus on those 2 items. I think they're important. The next item we talked about and didn't finalize was the salary range. And we talked about a range. Our recommended range was 195 to 245. The last search we did was 185 to 225. The reason we went to 245 is that's the current salary of the superintendent in Collier County, and I think that is an indicator. It's a West Coast district. Another indicator is Marion County, which is slightly larger, but a central Florida district is advertising 210. So we think the range of 195 to 245 would be very attractive. And again, just like in the last search, just because we have 245 there, it doesn't mean we're going to pay 245. In fact, we brought the last superintendent in considerably less than that. So I'd like to get a consensus from the board on the salary range.
Bridget?
Sorry, I thought you unmuted me. It was working and get together. You know, I'm fine with that range from an evaluation standpoint. I think it's important to note that's the base salary, I believe. Is that correct? Because I know when we get further down the road, the contracts and all of those have additional monetary value, and that's important to note. So I know there have been members of the public who really have cited wanting to have a substantial financial incentive to come here, and I want to make sure that they understand. I agree with that, but I think this is comparable and don't want to diminish the fact that we have a number of other benefits that come in addition to that salary. So I am okay with that range.
The reason is that Collier County, their superintendent is now at 245. Manatee, which is at 186, but that's because she was an in-house candidate that took the job. Osceola's at 202. And Marion County, small Marion County is at 210. So keep that in mind while we're talking. Shirley?
I think 245 is a little high. Our last superintendent had just gotten up to what, 195 or 205. I would prefer that we went from like 190 to 230 or something closer to that. I mean, the reason the last superintendent was at 185 when he started was I started him at the lowest rate that was there, which was, I'm not getting into that, but
Okay.
we started him at the lowest rate, and that was being a little spiteful at the time.
Jane?
I believe that the higher side is better. This is an expensive county to live in. We pay our teachers well. We should pay our superintendent well. So I agree with, actually, I could even go above 200, but I'm fine with 195 to 245 as a range.
Eric?
As always, I agree with Shirley Brown. I think that's a little bit, we are a plum county. We have incentives. We're an A district. We're in beautiful West Coast. We live in a great county. You got to go into Ms. Ziegler's point. You can't just look at how much you pay Collier County. You got to look at the benefits. Our previous superintendent made $252,000. Okay, and that was only on the taxable portion. That didn't include the fact that we paid for health insurance for his entire family. So if you're going to compare yourself to Collier, do they pay for free health insurance for the entire family, or they treat him like all the other employees? So just purely looking at base salary, because again, if you did that with the superintendent, you'd see $197,000. But when you look at his W-2, it was $252,000 is what our superintendent got, and that was only his taxable perks. That didn't include car, business expenses, his health insurance. So it was significantly higher than $252,000. So I agree with Ms. Brown that should be on the low end.
And Andrea, I know you have been doing the surveys. What are the people being offered now, those that are going out for jobs?
Yeah, I will tell you, there certainly is, typically, especially in a district where someone's relocating, they would get some relocation costs. To Mr. Robinson's point, they typically would have auto, maybe either a monthly amount or a vehicle provided by the district. They would typically have health insurance, whether, it depends on the district. Some districts have it in their contract that the superintendent has the same health insurance benefits as all other employees. Other districts allow, it sounds like what you had previously, where superintendent might have a different insurance plan. And then some superintendents, depending on, as the negotiations go, and Bill, you can add to this if you'd like, but as the negotiations go, for some superintendents, it's more important to have cash in pocket, so they want a higher starting salary. Other superintendents may want money in the form of an annuity that goes along with it. Bill, have I missed anything?
No, I think you've done an excellent job. And again, the amount at the top is not necessarily what is being offered or paid. And in fact, in our last search, the superintendent was brought in at the lower level that we just did. Volusia was, the superintendent there was brought in at 205. So, you know, I think that it's definitely a negotiable point, but I think you've made some good points, Andrea. It's really a preference to the board to what they want to see out there.
And I did want to mention, Madam Chair, that typically you would also have some performance incentives built into the contract. So depending on whatever the board's goals might be, whatever the strategic plan goals might be, whether or not the superintendent achieves them or works towards them annually, many times districts give performance incentives for that. So that would raise the superintendent's compensation package.
So I could see you. Bridget, you had your hand up, and then Shirley.
Thank you. So, and I think I agree with really all the statements that are made. That's why I wanted to start of saying, you know, this is a range to attract, and there are those packages that come in as we all just discussed in a variety of ways. So I guess, and I didn't hear what the differential was between what Bill had proposed as what we initialized and then what Mrs. Brown and Mr. Robinson had suggested. If I recall, it was about a 10,000. I mean, it wasn't from the base bottom. If we expand it to that end to the top, I mean, is there any negative about that? I think that it's about a $10,000 differential based on the bottom range, if I heard that correctly. And as we get towards negotiation, as Ms. Messina said, it depends on the person. When we go into negotiation, some want actually cash or they want perks. And those are things that we as a board can talk through. So.
Shirley?
Um, I think what Mr. Vogel had said was 195 to 245, and what I had proposed was 190 to 235. So, so it's a $45,000 range. We ran into problems last time when we had the bonuses based on goals, because then it became an issue with the uh, who is really responsible for reaching those goals. You know, was it the teacher? It wasn't the superintendent, you know, so we ran into that when we were paying him bonuses. I just remember that, but I mean, I would say if we're going to get up to the upper portion, I want to make sure that we're not throwing annuities in and some of the other things that were in the last contract. I mean, I'll go up to the 245, but I mean, I would prefer the 190 to 235 so they have an understanding. I mean, I don't want to give them 245 and an annuity and all this other stuff too.
But that, we don't have to give them an annuity, that's, but, and what I heard Andrea say that sometimes the higher salary will be more attractive to
Right.
them rather than the annuity. Don't talk, Shirley. Okay, okay. Where am I up to? I'm up to Jane. Jane.
If Jane wanted to speak.
I am fine with the lower, if that's what Mrs. Brown suggested, I'm fine with that. I think the board chair has some flexibilities in working out the contract terms and conditions. We can all look at that with the board chair and make those decisions as we go, depending on what happens. It's really great to I think, allow flexibility, not only with salary, but also for other things that might be involved in that contract.
Thank you. Eric?
Okay.
Wait a minute, Jane? Finish your comment, Jane. I muted you.
I was just saying that I am okay if you all want to go with the lower amount that Mrs. Brown suggested.
Eric?
Oh, he said he agreed.
I guess Brown, but now I agree with Miss Goodwin. So
Okay, so they both at 190.
Mr. Zucker?
Okay, I would like us to stay at the range length that you've offered, Bill, 197 to 245.
195 to 245?
Yeah, isn't that what you offered?
Yes, ma'am. That's the recommendation.
I would like to stay with your recommendation.
But I think three.
I need to solicit your comments though, whether you agree with it or not. So
Yes.
let's start the other way. Eric?
I still agree with the majority of Shirley Brown, Jane Goodwin, and myself. So I still agree with the majority.
Okay. Bridget, are you there too? With the majority? Okay.
Again, I'm fine. I think the base, as we're talking, is a differential of about $10,000. I'm fine with starting there. I do think, again, not to be redundant, even though I am going to be right now, is that those packages that we come into play do have a value to them. So, you know, my only, if by lowering it to 235 versus 245, we limit our candidate pool, I would defer again to Mr. Vogel and Miss Messina. So, but it's a 10,000. I mean, I'm flexible there. I think there can be flexibility capping the total value of, that's not just base salary, but a number of other things. If somebody were to take 245, for example, if we kept that range, that would hurt a lot of the additional packaged items because there's a financial value to them. So I'm not going to harp on it all day. I think I'm fine with lowering it. I think we're all on the same page, and if you will, it's just whether it's salary versus packages. So I won't hold back on that.
Thank you. Bill?
Ms. Zucker, let me suggest 190 to 240. What about that range? It seems like then we've taken into consideration what board members' concern was at the lower end and bringing off the 245. That Shirley was at 135, so that's kind of a compromise position so we can move forward. 190 to 240, it seems like is somewhat of a compromise.
Okay, Jane?
Nodding.
Shirley?
Nodding.
Bridget, nod, you're all nodding, so Eric,
Eric's nodding.
okay,
Okay, we're good.
thank you.
Very good.
Next, Bill.
Excellent, thank you. The next area was qualifications. And the last time we had a master's degree, doctorate preferred from an accredited institution, 10 years of educational or equivalent business or governmental experience. And then it was with at least 3 years in an executive leadership position. And we had a discussion that the 3 years was not sufficient. And I would recommend too that for executive leadership experience, I'd recommend going to 5 or 7. We also then preferred a doctorate degree and we preferred some Florida experience also. So the question I think we were all in agreement on was everything except executive leadership experience. And then a further point is, did we want to define what executive leadership experience was? So the first question we're seeking the board consensus on is executive experience. We were at 3. Do we want to go to 5 or 7?
Okay,
Andrea wants to
Shirley. Shirley said 5.
Andrea wants to speak too.
Andrea, you wanted to speak?
Yes, it is very important that we understand exactly what you mean by executive experience, because we will get people that ask us, does that mean principal? Does it mean district level management responsibility? Does it mean if it's from outside of education and industry, kind of what does that mean? Because that really helps us when we're talking to candidates.
So I have 2. Jane?
Finally learning this machine. I would say 5 to 7, and here's why. Give that a range like we did with the salary. I think that if you have a principal who has been a very principal of a large high school, boy, I can't think that doesn't account for inside leadership in a district office, because it does. So it's variable to me. But I think 5 to 7 years of leadership experience, and then having the flexibility of knowing what that person has been involved in is a good thing. 3 is not enough. 5 to 7 as a range would be my hope. And I think that gives us the greatest flexibility. And again, rather than, we're only looking for one person, but rather than having a finite hard 5, there may be some substantial reasons that we will want to go with the 5 to 7 range.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, I'm fine with the time ranges. My issue has to do with what constitutes executive level experience. I think, especially taking a school district and you using Ms. Goodwin's point about the principal, I believe a principal, one can make an argument that it is executive level experience, but there's a completely different process between being a principal of a school and then say becoming the executive director, like a Steve Cantese or Chris Renoff. Now you're managing people who are managing people. And now you have to learn a skill set. It is a skill set of allowing people the autonomy to run their schools, but still being able to make sure that those various schools all work within the greater good of the district. And so then once you master that skill set, then you go up to another level higher, where now you're having to deal not just with the schools. Now you're dealing, depends on whether you're Jody, Chief Operating Officer, but let's take Laura Kingsley. Now you're dealing with curriculum. Now you're dealing with textbook. Now you're dealing with the adoption of new standards. Now you're throwing into the mix all these other ancillary things. And your coworker, Chief Operating Officer, you need to be able to work with them for busing issues, IT issues, testing issues. And so you're having to use that skill set. And then take the person one step above. Now you're the superintendent. And now you're having to allow the Chief Academic Officer, the Chief Operating Officer, the ability to do their job, at the same time being able to give the autonomy down to the people below them. And those are managerial skill sets that the person has to learn. I think personally, Sarasota should not be getting somebody who needs to learn those skill sets on the job. We need to get somebody who already has those skill sets. And so I would prefer the person to be, we deserve to get somebody who is either an existing superintendent or one step below to be an associate superintendent. I think that our district is good enough that we deserve people like that. To have to reach down 4 or 5 levels down and pull that person up and then expect that person, because you're setting that person up for failure by putting that person in a job which they don't have the skill set necessary to accomplish, isn't fair to that person and isn't fair to the district. So I think that our district deserves better, and I think we should at least be able to attract, if not somebody who's the superintendent of a district, but somebody who's the associate superintendent of a district.
All right, does everyone agree with Eric? Bridget?
I,
see
you know,
you. I see you going back and
I-
forth.
I agree with the notion. I think so. Let me start on the 5 to 7. I think that is a good point. I think in general we want to be cautious of being too finite, and that gives us some flexibility because as you evaluate some of these, you know, the objective and subjective elements and come together to figure out what that right fit is. I like the idea of sometimes people outside of the box may come to bear with some really good valuable skills. But I think Mr. Robinson also, again, brings up some good points. I think Sarasota deserves the best too. I also think that there, to Mrs. Goodwin's point, there are leaders, you know, I think of how do you define executive leadership? You know, even if we think of something or comparable, I have to imagine if I use the last time or when even conversations with Mr. Vogel, people tend to all rise to the top. And so these are, I believe, somewhat, we're talking about who can apply at the end of the day. It's not who do we end up picking. And I think that competition is going to be pretty tough if you are if you're a principal and that's how you define it of a 4,000 plus school, but you have accomplished some significant elements and that comes through in the interviewing process and that's how they show it, versus a superintendent from a smaller school that, or maybe not have done great. I don't know. I mean, there's just a range. I would like to make it more broad. And I believe that at the end of the day, the right person will rise up. But that's just my personal opinion. So,
Jane, unmute yourself.
I'm trying, but
Jamal's messing with her.
Oh,
Sorry.
Jamal, stop messing with her.
He's trying to do it for
I
you.
want to qualify what I said. I don't want a finite number of years either. I think 5 to 7. And what I meant by that is in that 5 to 7, there may be a principal who's coming out, there may be a principal. For example, we have Laura Kingsley who came to an executive director's level from Fruitville Elementary. She's been a great leader. But I'm saying that in the 5 to 7 years, we may have some components that might be a principal, and then that person moved up the ladder into administration with a district and is now an assistant superintendent or whatever. I didn't mean to say that, we would be choosing someone who is coming from solely that background, but I was looking at the range of years and saying they may have come through a principalship and then into district leadership, and those would be consistent of the 5 to 7 years. If they have that kind of experience, then we should count that in 5 to 7 years and not say, oops, can't take that person because they have 5 years in a district, but another 2 years as a principal. So that's really where I was coming from, is looking at the composite work from their background, and that might have been a component in the 5 to 7.
Shirley?
Dr. Vogel, I want to ask Dr. Vogel, did you say 5 to 7 or 5 or 7?
I'm hearing 5. I said a 5 or 7 was the number I put out.
Or more.
I don't have a problem with 5 to 7. I'm
All right.
hearing
But what if you get 15?
Why don't we say 5 or more?
5 or more would be fine. That would take care of it. And I think it sounds to me that would be fine with all of the board members on the experience.
Yep.
Because if I had 15 years or
Yeah.
something, I don't
Let's
want
do 5 or more.
I'm saying yes. You can shake your heads, I can see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
five or
don't,
more.
Eric is not.
He's good. 5 or
Okay, you
more
gotta
years.
do it so
Yes.
I can see you.
What Andrea typed is good. 5 or more years of executive experience. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Andrea.
The other thing that I heard, which may take care of itself, is this. What we've had in previous searches where executive level experience was not clearly defined, when those, depending on the candidate pool, when the Citizens Advisory Committee looked at the candidate pool, they evaluated the applicants, and some pools, would take, just as Eric is saying, would take it more into consideration if they had district level experience rather than just principal experience. But as one of the board members pointed out, there may be a principal at a large school that may have had some of those experiences. So we're really, to move along, I think this has been a good discussion, and I think the answer to that one is 5 years of executive level experience or more. I think we can move on, if that sounds okay.
No, Bill, we still have not defined what, if we wanted an associate superintendent level or a principal level, or what level candidate are we looking for? That's what we're discussing. 5 to 7 is
Okay,
gone.
5 plus, we're done. Okay. I would say this, you could put associate superintendent or above preferred.
Do you guys want to do that? Or do you want to open it up more? Eric?
I'm the superintendent search committee would understand that, but Jane, I mean, Ms. Goodwin has a point that if someone's an associate superintendent, but haven't been it for 7 years, and prior to that was a principal of a large school, that would be fine. But the expectation is it's more than just a principal. It's somebody associate superintendent, and possibly they could use the principal's experience, like Jane had mentioned. But I think we deserve an associate superintendent or a superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Shirley?
I think we should just put down that we prefer someone who's been acknowledged as the superintendent of the year, either on Florida or national
Oh,
level.
come on. You're being too prescriptive.
That one would be rough.
Oh,
Bridget,
okay, I take it back.
take it back, shove it back in. Bridget?
So I think the happy compromise is what Mr. Vogel mentioned is, associate superintendent or higher preferred. That doesn't box you in, but it certainly sends a signal as to the level of caliber of candidates that we are looking for. And if someone doesn't fall in that box and feels bold enough to, by all means, so I'm fine with that language.
Okay, you guys all moved around up there. So Eric, did you speak in on this?
Yes. She did.
You did. Jane?
Oh, she's good.
Don't need to speak.
You good?
No
She's
need
good.
to.
Bill.
Bill,
Okay, Bill?
What I might want to suggest on that is associate superintendent or equivalent preferred, because some districts don't have an associate superintendent title. They might have chief operating officer, executive officer, or an executive director in that position. So we'll word up something like that. So I think we have 5 to 7 years executive level experience, and we're not going to talk about principals on that, 5 or more, and then we're going to talk about associate superintendent or equivalent preferred.
Okay, I got 2 yeses from Shirley and Eric. So I need Jane and Bridget. Bridget's okay, Jane's okay. All right.
Okay.
Excellent work, and we'll finalize this and get back through. We're doing really well. We've reached consensus on everything so far. The next one is finalizing the advertising venues, and John Reichert is going to be taking this one. And before we leave today, we're going to come back to the personality tests and the citizens committees. So Mitzi, make sure we cover those 2 before we're finished.
Okay.
John, I think you've got the advertising venues, and I believe that's a draft of that is in the book that Mrs. Tompkins put together for you. John, are you
there?
Yes, can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay,
Can't see you,
and
but we can hear you.
Okay, and I apologize for no video. I think I clicked the wrong button and I don't want to try to mess up and go back and correct it. So if you recall at our March meeting, I think it was March the 3rd, we spoke and talked about a list of potential sites to advertise in. Typically, there are 5 sites that school districts do look to advertise in. It's, of course, the primary one where we get a lot of responses is Ed Week, the top school's job. Recently, a few districts have posted in the American Association of School Administrators. Certainly the FAFSA site has produced some applicants for us. And then to kind of look into reaching a diverse population, we would recommend the board consider the National Alliance of Black Educators and also the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. They have a pretty good listing that they kind of do contact all on at the Latino Association. So those would be the 5 associations or 5 venues that we would suggest that the board consider posting the advertisements in. There are some fees associated with those particular sites. Depending on the length of time that the board would advertise, generally speaking, a month advertisement in the top school jobs, Ed Week, is about $500 a month. The American Association for 30 days is about $500 as well. Your National Alliance of Black School Educators, for the month posting, it's $250. The FAFSA site for a month is $300. And then your Latino Association for 6 weeks of posting is $150. So depending on the length of advertisement, whether it be a month or 2 months, and the advertisements do not have to be a month specific, say the first of the month to the last of the month. It is a 30-day advertisement window. So you could start in the middle of a month and end in the middle of the next month. So there are also some additional sites that we have free postings in. The National School Boards Association and the National Connections Hub is free. We do post it in that through some of the contacts that Ms. Messina has. The National Affiliation of Superintendent Searches, NAS, it's a nationwide organization, and we're able to post there without a charge. The Broad Center, we're able to put there as well. And also all of the state associations of school administrators and superintendents, and then also those state associations of school boards, which Andrea has contacts with. Those last 5 or 6 venues that we could post in are no charge, and we would certainly recommend posting there as well. So I think the decision we'd like to see the board look at today is, what out of those 5 venues where there's fees associated, would you like to advertise or at least begin with a 30-day posting whenever the board decides to post the ads in those 5 venues that have fees associated?
Okay, I will take the consensus. Jane?
You're good, Jane.
Jane?
Oh, she muted herself.
I think I muted it by mistake. Okay, I'm having trouble with the mute.
Yeah, you're doing great.
I'm fine. I'm fine with advertising in all of those.
Okay. Eric?
I really want us to do the Hispanic and the African American. Those in particular, I think, are important. The overall superintendent of the U.S., I think those are good. I think you've got excellent choices, but I'm in favor of doing all.
Yep. Eric?
But yeah, mine is not a commentary of time or when we advertise. Mine commentary is just on the areas which we advertise. And so I got to rely upon you guys as the experts to know that these are the right places to advertise. But again, my commentary is not a commentary about when, it's just where.
Thank you.
Okay, Shirley? You okay with
Yeah,
it?
yeah, that's what we pay them the big bucks for, is to learn where to put it. And I'm agreeing with their recommendations.
Bridget,
Thank you very much. The
wait,
next,
wait, Bill.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
Well, and then, you may, I have no issue about the outlets. I do think we need to talk about the time of which we do, because there's a financial impact to that. And I don't want to, because this is a different setup. Is that something you're going to address?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, so I am fine with the outlets. That's
Okay.
first.
Thank you very much. The next is the brochure, and we've made a lot of progress at this meeting. We've decided on the salary, the qualifications, and also the qualities. We'll have that done in about a week. So Mrs. Corcoran, your team, maybe over the next period of time, can pull the brochure together. Our recommendation would be just to use the same format as you had before and just substitute some of the wording, because your brochure has been recognized statewide as the best. Every district looks at it and they try to use that in some format.
Bill, yeah, that is the plan. We are, Cabinet has all received copies of the brochure. We had all looked at it and made some initial comments about removing the MGT study, adding, the 25 million in security upgrades and some different things. But then we were going to take it, review it, and bring it back. And the bringing it back part has just not happened because the focus has been on other things. But I think within the next week or so, we should be able to get ourselves into a rhythm and then readdress that particular piece. And then while we're waiting on the other items to also incorporate into it. And then Mina has the initial copy from the last time we did the search, so he should be able to update from there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Okay, Bill.
Excellent, thank you. Next on our is the timeline. And I know there's been some questions on the timeline, but Mrs. Zucker has come up, I think, with some ideas that might help us all move forward. I think what our concern was, our original timeline was to go out for advertising April 9th. And because of a set of circumstances that we're all dealing with COVID-19, we talked about possibly starting out almost immediately with an announcement of the position, that we have the position open, and sending that out. And then at our next board meeting, we can assess where we are and then do a formal advertisement posting. I think from what I've understand, in talking with and listening, this might be a solution so we can all come together on what we're moving forward on it. John has some good ideas on the timeline. And Andrea, do you want to kind of lead us into that? And maybe John, talk about if we don't advertise April 9th, we still can get this search completed almost within the board timeline of in July. So Andrea, do you want to start this conversation, and then we'll move forward on it?
Sure. Let me just make sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I have worked on sort of a press release language that would basically say, and I sent it to Mrs. Zucker just before this meeting so she could see it, but basically it just says Sarasota County School District seeking superintendent. And then it goes on to say the Sarasota County School District is seeking a visionary individual to lead one of Florida's and the nation's highest performing school districts. The district's located on Florida's beautiful southwest coast, serves a diverse population of more than 43,000 students. The district's been A-rated by the Florida Department of Education every year since the grading system was introduced in 2004 and has achieved an 89.4% graduation rate. District has 41 regular schools, 12 charter schools. Technical colleges offer advanced and career preparation for those not pursuing college opportunities. And then it goes on to just say the Sarasota County School District is strongly supported by the community as evidenced by continuous passage of additional millage and sales tax. School district also benefits from actively engaged philanthropic individuals and organizations. this is where we get into the announcement part. The school district's current priority of addressing the impact of the COVID-19 coronavirus on the district and community required the school board to temporarily pause superintendent search activities. Adjustments to the timeline and advertisement period, if any, will be announced as soon as possible. Tentatively, the school board plans to post the formal advertisement by early May, with the position filled by July 2020. Required qualifications and formal process for applying is forthcoming. And then if they have any additional questions. So at least that way we're addressing it. We're saying that it's still moving forward. We're giving the timeline of advertisements will begin in May, still planning to fill the position by July 2020. And then if we release that, then the next step is John's gonna talk to you about some of the timeline items just to keep us moving forward, which includes Mr. Robinson. You know, we're gonna need to discuss that piece on the personality assessment, if that's something, because we're gonna have to allocate time for that. Same is true for community involvement, that sort of stuff. How much time do we need for advertisement? How much time do we need for some of those other activities?
Well, why don't I start with that main question, Andrea? Let's start with Jane. How do you feel about the personality testing?
Well, you know, personality tests I've taken all my life, and we've had some with our former superintendent. I would defer to Mr. Hardy and ask him, are there some liability issues with doing a personality test in this with a list of what final candidates, I would think? Would that be what we would do, or will we be doing a personality test for more people? How many are we talking about?
Well, if you're asking me, I suppose that depends on what the board would like to do. My assumption was you were dealing with the finalists, but I don't know that. The legal issues that I think at least potentially are raised, I shared last month. That is, I think that any results are going to be public records. That may or may not be a concern for people who are not yet employees here. I think there may be some level of difference between I'm the superintendent and I'm taking a test along with the board, as opposed to I'm simply an applicant for a job who may not get the job, and I go back to my district with this now out in the public. I don't know if that's an issue for people or not. I know when I sought input from my colleagues around the state, if this had been done other places, trying to get a handle on it, I was not aware of, or I wasn't told of anywhere where that happened with candidates. Perhaps Dr. Vogel knows something different than that. And several of them commented that may, this is obviously just their opinion, but that may cause some people not to want to apply. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's something that was expressed. From the purely legal standpoint, I know there's been at least one case where one personality test was determined to violate the ADA because it was considered to be a medical exam, which couldn't be done before. Now, I don't think that one, and I've got the name, it was the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test, which federal court said did more than measure personality traits, but also kind of became a medical record because it measured certain medical issues. I would think, I'm not an expert on personality tests, but I would think there are some out there that would not raise those kinds of issues. I know I've taken them in the past, and you were a D or an I or an S or a C, and it wasn't designed to tell if you were, you know, depressed or paranoid. So we can probably get around that, but that could depend on what kind of test we give. And then practically speaking, I think you all would need to know what is it you're looking for, because I don't think there's necessarily in these tests, it's not like a math test where there's a right answer or a wrong answer. There are just different types of personality characteristics. And I think you would all have to decide which of those personality characteristics you were looking for. Unfortunately, you'd have to decide those in the public, and then probably a savvy applicant would know that and probably could fix his or her answers to meet those, but that's beyond the scope of my expertise. From the legal standpoint, I'm telling you, most likely a public record that may or may not be a concern. And second, we just have to make sure that the test, if one is administered, that it's not a quote unquote medical test that would get us into an ADA issue. So that's really my input from the legal side.
Let me go back to Jane, since she's the one that asked the question. And then I see you, Shirley. I know you want to talk. Jane?
Well, in that case, I'm thinking about this. I'm against having a personality test. I think we don't, I don't think that it's necessary. I think that we can do our due diligence without it. I've never used one in hiring anyone. I've used one after the fact in working with teams and that sort of thing. But I think I would be against it. So that's my answer.
Shirley, your hand was up.
I found the one that we took, for our last retreat was worthless. I don't know what it was supposed to tell us, but it said each one of us was different. And what difference does it make? Especially with the issues that Art raises, I have no faith in these tests to begin with. I'm really adamantly opposed to taking the test. I think it's a waste of time, and to open us up to issues would be ridiculous. I see no need for it at all.
Bridget?
Well, when it was raised by Mr. Robinson, I actually thought it was a really good idea. In the private sector world, it's very common, especially at the executive level. And it's not so much so that we would combine and say, this is what we're looking for. It supplements the qualifications, qualities that we'd be looking for. They're just different leadership styles. And that may enhance some of the goals that we want to do or where we want to go. I think it's a very common regular practice, if best practice, in certainly in the corporate world. I have used them both in hiring and to be hired. And I would seek to get a better sense of what Mr. Vogel or it may not be something that's commonly used. The liability standpoint, because they're so frequently used in the corporate world, and they could be wide open for any litigation. It's not something I've done some research that I certainly haven't seen. I think we'd want to stay away from anything that would potentially guide us there, but I believe that there's a number of them that are used. I know it sounds like 3, or I don't know, Caroline, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not in favor of it.
So, I think it's a great idea. I think it could bring some value to our evaluation of who that next person is. And there's no good, right or wrong answer. It just, again, it supports that kind of leadership and some of the goals that they accomplished and where we are going. But if the majority says no, I don't think that, I believe it's a good idea. So, but I'll leave it at that.
Eric?
First, I want to start off, Ms. Messina, Ms. Vogel, if you guys get another press release, or you guys are going to, issue something like that you give out to one board member in advance of a meeting, if you guys can give it out to all board members, I'd greatly appreciate it. But going to the actual personality assessment, obviously I'm the one who brought it up. So, and like Ms. Ziegler said, it's very, very common in the private sector. It's very common for the executive. And I'd like to get some of that knowledge ahead of time. But again, if the majority doesn't want to do it, it's not a hill that I'm willing to die on.
Hold on just a second. There you go. Go ahead, Caroline.
Okay, I'm sorry. They muted me. Not muted. Bill, would you want to go to the next? Because I think you have your answer on that one. It's no.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to go back to what Andrea proposed as far as the announcement. And then Andrea, do you want to have John talk a little bit about the timeline that would enable us to move the process forward?
Yeah, let me start with the announcement, because what I just pulled together was based on stuff that I had heard concerns. This is not ready to go. This is not a press release ready to go at all. This was me drafting something, asking the chair if she thought I should bring it up in the meeting. She said, yes, please do. So the expectation would be after this meeting, I would forward that to everyone, get your input to adjust it accordingly, and then I would not absolutely release it. It would actually go through Mitzi and your staff to release any press release. So I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you.
And then, John, if we're not going to do the personality thing, I know you've worked up some sample timelines that could still meet the goals of the board. Did you want to share those, please?
Madam Chair and board members, I've spent some time working on potentially 4 different options of a new timeline. And if I could, let me just, rather than, I certainly don't want to give dates on 4 different timelines, but in general, I have as I said, one timeline that would add a week to the posting period, that we would post the advertisements on April the 27th, the formal advertisement. And what that allows us to stay in with getting the board to appoint or select their new superintendent on July the 7th would mean that the board would potentially not go through the process of identifying semifinalists, but simply going from the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendations to the board, and then the board selects the finalists from that group. This timeline also still allows for 3 Citizens Advisory Committee meetings if needed, but it simply does not have the board selecting semifinalists. And as I mentioned, the board would still be able to select their superintendent on July the 7th. That does.
Can I interrupt you for a minute, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought we were going to do the Citizens Committee and they are going to call down.
Right, I think it was
Yeah.
whether or not you wanted semifinalists, and then you would then move that down to finalists and then do your interviews, or do you want them to just present you with the
I
group
thought
and
they-
you determine your finalists?
I thought that, I thought you all were going to do, you all, Bill and Andrea, John, that you all were going to cull through 50, say we have 50 applicants, which is not even 30, that you were going to cull down to 10 and give those 10 to the Citizens Committee. And then the Citizens Committee would recommend to us their top choices, and then we could go through them. I thought that's what we had agreed on.
Madam Chair, basically the process would be that the Citizens Advisory Committee receives all of the applications,
Yeah.
30 or 35.
Okay.
They basically then evaluate those total applications, 30 or 35, and then their goal would be to submit to the board 8 to 10 or 11 or 12 candidates from that group for your further consideration. So let's assume that the Citizen Advisory Committee finishes their work and they submit 10 names to the school board for your further consideration. The board then would accept those recommendations from the advisory committee. Certainly the board can add anyone if they wish. And the option would be at that point, when you receive those 10 or 11 names from the Citizens Advisory Committee, do you want to take those 10 or 11 names and maybe select 6 or 7 semifinalists from that group, have them respond to questions, and then come back a week later and select 3 or 4 finalists for interview? Or do you simply want to eliminate the semifinalist selection, and once the Citizens Advisory Committee sends you 8 to 10 to 12 names, from that group of names, the school board would then meet to select from that group the 4 or 5 finalists or 3 finalists that you would want to bring in directly for interviews. So the Citizens Advisory Committee receives all applications, they do their work, and then submits to the board a group for your further consideration.
A group of how many, John?
It's a fluid number. We asked them to look at maybe from 8 to 10. We've had groups that have said when they received that goal to screen down to 8 to 10 or 11 or 12, we've had citizens advisory committees who've come in with, say, 7. And the majority of that membership of that committee says, these are the 7 quality candidates that we want to send forward. We don't really think we need to meet a firm number of 8 to 10. We think these 7 are the top group, and these are the ones that we would be very comfortable with the board selecting as from this group as the next superintendent.
Okay. Eric left. Shirley?
Yeah, that's too many. We're trying to turn off, this is fine. Trying to turn off some lights because there's a lot of glare and I can't see the writing over there. I'd rather go through the timeline starting from where we are now and here we're going to go. And does FSBA look at these applications and weed out some of them that don't meet the qualifications before they give them to the Citizens Committee, or does the Citizens Committee get everyone we get?
Ms. Brown, we provide them with everyone because we want it to be as open and transparent as possible. However, at the second meeting, if there is a person who kind of rises to where the group is continuing to consider that person, if he or she doesn't meet the minimum qualifications, then we eliminate that person at that point. But we sometimes feel it is, we just don't want to give any impression that we're holding back candidates and from this committee to review.
Well, I'm concerned that we might be pushing it a little fast there from when we get the semifinalists to those last 3 finalists that we have. I don't want to have one of these finalists and then find out there's something in their background that we should have known about. I want to make sure that there's some time in there that we get some background information on these people, that somebody has done something on these, or are we all going to have to Google everybody?
No, ma'am. We basically, around the second meeting of the advisory committee, when we see names that are coming to the top of the group, FSBA goes ahead and conducts some background searches through the company that we have to perform those functions. We also, a lot of some of the candidates who might have previously applied in other districts, we already have some information on these folks. So there is a time period and a window prior to the date that the board would look at identifying finalists that we would have conducted our background checks through the law firm that we use.
Okay, and I'd like to know, because obviously we're not going to start the advertising on April 9th. When are we going to start that advertising, and then how long is it going to be advertised before we start getting it? Because I'd like to know what the rest of that calendar looks like. We don't have to worry about the June 23rd or any of those dates anymore. My trip to Africa has been canceled. So I'd like to know what that new calendar would look like, when those applications would be out there, because maybe we need to leave that window open for when the applications are out there. Maybe, because like now we've got the committee looking at them in May, and I just don't see that's going to work. I don't think the committee can even, I think we need to leave it open until May, and so that the committee can maybe start looking at them in June. Or am I off base there?
No, ma'am. If I could, one of the options that I have for a calendar would be to look at posting the advertisement on April the 21st. I'm sorry, let me back up. Posting the ad on April the 27th, and it would run for 5 weeks until May the 29th. Then we would have our 3 Citizens Advisory Committee meetings on June the 2nd, June 9th, and June 16th would be their last meeting. The board would then receive the recommendations from the advisory committee on June the 17th. And then on June the 22nd, if you eliminated the semifinalist phase and went directly from the list from the advisory committee to select your finalist, you would select your finalist on June 22nd.
We would do that without having that second list of questions to those 3 finalists? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, if usually the list of questions we would send to all of those that come from the advisory committee, and then from there, that helps you narrow down your finalist.
Eric?
Yeah, I gotta ask a question again, because Ms. Zucker was, I have 2 first. She was talking about that you guys had an agreement that you guys would comb down to 10 and then go from there. I mean, we're all allowed to call Mr. Vogel, but I didn't think we were all getting agreements with Mr. Vogel,
No,
Mr.
Eric.
Messina.
that
So I was just
my
curious,
Eric,
Vogel,
that
what
was
that was.
my-
Can I talk? Can
I
I?
just want to tell you that
Yes,
that
ma'am.
was my misunderstanding,
Okay.
okay?
So I was.
My
I know.
misunderstanding.
She's talking while I'm talking. So that's my point, Mr. Vogel. As I've said in multiple meetings and in public, I think we need to place a pause to ask Citizens Committee of 25 people to meet during this crisis is going to be problematic. Even if you get them in on Zoom, it's one thing. There's 5 of us and we're all friends and we all know each other, so we can. It's easier for us to do this. But can you imagine doing this with 25 citizens of our community? I think that's going to be rather problematic to do Zoom. I think that I also think you're going to have a hard time getting qualified people to apply during this period of time. I think we should reevaluate this at our next meeting to determine what the status of the crisis is. Because I can tell you this much: if there's a superintendent who wants to abandon his district in the middle of this process, I don't think that's the superintendent that we want at our school district. They need to be concentrated on their district and the issues at their district. And I think advertising in the month of April, I just think is tone deaf to what's going on. There are people literally dying from this disease. More and more people are getting cases from this. Everybody's life is turned upside down, and yet we're just going to keep moving on as if nothing has changed in this process. Something has changed in the process. Something has changed in our society. Something has changed in our worldview. And to recognize that, to say, we're not going to let anything change our view. July 1st is when we're going to do it. We're going to do it in July. I don't see any reason to come back again in 2 weeks, a couple of weeks, look to see what the situation is, and then revisit it now. But to say right now, this is when we're going to advertise, this is when we're going to bring 25 people in a room, which we may not even legally be able to do, be able to bring 25 people together. And again, putting Zoom for 25 people may be extremely chaotic and problematic. I don't see any reason to pause for 2 weeks or for our next board meeting, reevaluate the situation, and move on from there. We're still going to be able to do it before the school year starts, but just putting a pause for a couple of weeks and reevaluating the situation. Because think about how much the situation has changed in the past 30 days, okay? Who knows what the situation is going to be like 30 days from now? And it's such a fluid, chaotic situation. And I think that we need to be cognizant of that and how it's affecting everybody. And it's affecting the superintendents who could apply. So my feeling is that we place pause and reevaluate. Not long, maybe in a couple of weeks.
So if I might, we have, I see you, Bill, I'll get you. We have paused. We were supposed to advertise on the 9th. We're not. We're advertising later. Bill?
Yes, in response to you, Mr. Robinson, that's why that we have not prepared any formal timelines to you, because what you're saying was basically our intent is to go ahead and place an announcement right now, and then at the next school board meeting, then maybe when we would see exactly what the circumstances are at that time, then the board could come forward with a definitive timeline. So we're trying to address all of the concerns that we've heard, and we do realize that, you know, the priority of the community is dealing with the COVID-19 virus. So basically, what you're saying is, you know, what is consistent with what we're thinking right at this point, and that's why we did not provide any specific timelines, but just be able to talk through some possible timelines until the board can make that final decision to move forward.
Thank you, Bill. Bridget?
Thank you. Well, and Bill, thank you for that, because I have a lot of notes and it's been some time, and I'll try to be concise here. I know, and I can see some of the emails Andrea had mentioned that she's forwarding what John had gone through, and I wanted to clarify. You know, I want to make sure that I was able to visually see that, because I was writing all them down. But I want to go back and so if I understand correctly, because I am very concerned about any timeline where we would be truly still trying to hit the July 1st, I'm looking here, or July 14th date. I have had multiple conversations with Mrs. Corcoran, and I also spoke with Mr. Vogel. I have no doubt that, listen, every single organization, industry, everyone has had to adapt, and we can do that. So it doesn't mean you have to completely halt it, because I understand that we do want to find a new superintendent. I think any timeline, but I do think there needs to be a serious reflection, and I'm alarmed even at the potential that we would still try to be hitting that July 1st, because as of right now, school is closed until May 1st. So to even potentially consider April 27th putting something out is concerning for a number of reasons. But even still, I think that the announcement I'm not opposed to. I'd have to again listen to that language. I think that's good to let people who have been aware that we're in a search know what's happening, know that we're still going to, but we don't have a certain timeline yet. I'm hesitant to put anything in there, but I'd like to hear some feedback on there. I also understand that we may lose other people to other opportunities. However, I don't, you know, in my mind, and I know Mr. Robinson said this, I worry if we continue with any expeditious level where we will diminish the quality of our candidates, or, you know, or ones that have, or lose their credibility from the public standpoint. Anyone that we would be looking at is in a leadership, and we just went through the, you know, qualifications. They're going to be in a leadership position, and not just when we go back to school. I mean, companies and organizations, when we do, God willing, soon, there's a whole recovery and restoration process because things have been turned upside down. And so I just want to make sure this board works and is very thoughtful, and that the July 1st or July 14th date isn't more important than the holistic approach of getting the right person, ensuring the community supports them, ensuring that person's able to be successful, and ensuring we optimize the quality of candidates. And so if what is suggested, and I believe Mr. Vogel just mentioned that, is there is no timeline, we would be addressing a timeline in a more detailed way at the next board meeting. Is that accurate?
That,
Bill?
that's correct. Right now, what we would do is hopefully have a consensus on an announcement. And then we would do everything we need to do with the qualities, and work on the brochure and work on everything that we need to be able to go ahead and advertise, but we would not finalize a timeline and not go ahead and advertise until after the board had further conversation at a future board meeting. That's why we didn't bring any timeline.
Okay, but what was potentially listed out there was still incredibly aggressive, and I cannot say enough, and I know you know where I stand. I can't say enough that I urge every single one of us to really consider that when we come back at our next meeting, April, what have you, to discuss that timeline, to try to surge ahead with a July start date, I believe is the wrong approach. I'm not saying forever. Again, I've talked to Mrs. Corcoran about that. And it just concerns me that that was some of the drafts, but you clarified for me. But again, I hear it. I believe we're still in a healing phase with our community. And I think it's really important that this, I would argue, the most important position in the county. And I want to make sure we do it correctly, but I don't want it to be elongated forever. We don't know how long we're going to be in this. And so I think I'm willing to be adaptable, but this is the first time we've met since this happened. I know now that we have been cleared, and Mr. Hardy let me know if this is not accurate, we were able to continue to meet as opposed to the initial executive order directive that came from the Department of Education that we weren't to have meetings outside of emergency meetings until June 30th. So if that's not an issue anymore, we can continue this discussion at April 20, I don't know what date you guys had, where we can really hone in and evaluate what the path forward looks like. But April 27th, to put out any kind of announcement, it doesn't jive with me.
It's just, Shirley, go ahead.
I thought I was sending out notices, but I might be sending them just to Eric for some reason. I was suggesting that in the announcement that we send out, we don't have to put a specific date to say we want to hire someone by July, whether it's the 1st or the 3rd. Why can't we just say that we want to have somebody in place this summer? I mean, that could take us into August if it had to, because, like I said, we don't know who's going to be coming in. And Eric's right. We've got to do things differently than we did. We might have to be doing it all by Zoom, but we're not going to be stopping operations. We're still going to be hiring teachers, I understand. We're still going to be hiring other staff. And this doesn't mean that we should come to a standstill. I think that, we look at the applications that we get in. And if we don't get any decent applications in that we feel are what we want, then we re-advertise. We can do that. But I think if we say that we want to try to get somebody in by the summer, that gives us that wiggle room. But then I agree too that we should wait to advertise until May 1st.
Jane?
Whatever.
There she goes. There you go.
There you go, Jen.
Jamal's messing with you.
I would like to go ahead with the announcement and leave it to, we'll be hiring a superintendent this summer. I think there's nothing wrong with taking a pause. We've been on a pause. Take a pause between now and the next board meeting. But I am not in favor of and being concerned and being inactive on putting something together this summer. There were good candidates that I think will apply. And we will be out of school, hopefully, at a regular time. We have no tests, so we should be able to wrap our school calendar year up. And I'm talking to other superintendents in other school districts and the Superintendents Association. Most everybody is very hopeful that with the elimination of the tests, the big ogre, that we'll all be getting out of school on a regular, timely basis. So I'd like to keep this going forward. We need help. Mrs. Corcoran is doing a wonderful job. She has 2 big, wonderful jobs to do. We need to get a superintendent in that can devote the time and allow our cabinet to not go on with the crazy schedule and the stress that they're experiencing. And I'm not hearing that from Mrs. Corcoran or anyone else, but I know it's tough. and we don't have our communications director yet, and that's also, I think, a big problem. So I say that we pause now, we take a look at a timeline at our next board meeting. There's absolutely no reason why we won't continue with our regular board meetings, I would think, and we go from there, because I'm excited. I will tell you this, I talked to a couple of search organizations this morning. One is a personal friend of mine who doesn't do superintendent searches, but she's just doing and going along electronically. I really feel that telemedicine will be with us from now on, and I think that doing things without being there will be a new way of life for all of us. I think some of the things that we're doing now, we will continue to do. But there was a search process taking place in this community in the last few days, and so I heard about that. And I know that Marion County has their finalists for their new superintendent later this week, and they're using Zoom for that. So I think there are some ways of doing this, and let's look at it. Let's be reflective, and then let's make a decision at the next board meeting.
This is Caroline. I think that I just want to be clear that we're saying it's all right to send out that announcement letter. That we've agreed to, right? Andrea?
Yes, I just sent that by email to everyone so they can see it in their email. What you'll notice in there, and the one that I have in front of me that I'm still manipulating, I changed it to the position should be filled by summer 2020 to accommodate what Ms. Brown recommended. I will put in the required qualifications that you all agreed to during this meeting. Mr. Vogel led you through that part of the conversation, which included 5 or more years of executive experience, and there was another piece on that. Associate superintendent or equivalent preferred, that kind of stuff I'll put in here as well. Then I'll say the formal process for applying is forthcoming. But I did want you to know I've sent that to everybody, and I will put the qualifications in. I'll update that within the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll shoot you the next level draft.
Thank you, Andrea. Bill?
Yes, ma'am. I think.
Wait a minute. Wait, excuse me. Bridget?
Yeah, I just, one other thing, again, I get the announcement, I think makes sense. The time certain, let me put it a different way. I think our intent certainly is to get someone as soon as possible. And our hope is with an unknown, not knowing what each day holds for us at this time, was to get someone in place before the beginning of the next school year. My only part that I want to just ask maybe Andrea or Bill, my worry is that, again, if anyone applies right now, and they could be the best thing since, just remarkable, I would question if they're sitting in a leadership position, their leadership qualities to apply when they're there to navigate the ship. Now, listen, things change all the time, but I want whoever comes to fill the seat have the support and credibility behind them to be successful. And so I just would like to hear what your opinion is on that. So I like the announcement. It gives some notification. I'm not crazy about it. We are going to have someone by summer of 2020. I think our hope is to have someone by 2020 as we navigate this. And I think those semantics actually matter. But I would like your feedback on the damage that I think that potentially could be done to the success of this superintendent who fills this, who's applying. If we got a resume or information right now and that person's in a leadership position in a district across the country, what are your thoughts on that? And I worry that we start to hurt our candidate pool at that point.
What I have done is check with some potential candidates. I do have to report that there are 2 candidates that I'm personally aware of I've talked to that have at this time withdrawn their application from applying in another district at this time because of the concern that Mrs. Ziegler is addressing, because they felt that their priorities needed to be with their existing district. However, both of those individuals are very interested in Sarasota, and depending on the timing of the advertisement, and also depending on what the circumstances are in their district at that particular time, that would make them make a decision on whether they would be able to leave their district or not. So I think, just like we've talked about, the uncertainty right now is a good reason to pause, as I think the board is coming together on. Yet by doing the announcement, that's something that we're all agreeing with, so at least we've got that out there. So I think you raised a good point. I know Mrs. Messina has checked nationally and would have some more information, probably nationally, that she could relate.
Andrea?
Thank you. Yeah, certainly if we would have been applying or asking for applications the last 2 or 3 weeks, we probably would not have seen people apply. The longer we stay in a
Neutral.
well, the longer we stay in a situation that at least has some consistency to it, the more likely people are going to start then having a sense of normalcy, although it's not what was regular, what used to be regular. So if we're bumping it a few weeks, they'll even if we're still in a stay-at-home order or whatever we might be under, the longer that becomes more routine, the more likely we are to have more people willing to start considering some other options. The really big effort, and when people were pulling out, that we saw was the previous 3 weeks, which was when things were really in an upheaval. But we don't know, it's exactly what you all have said over and over, things are changing every day. So we don't know if that's going to stay or if the consistency of staying at home becomes more routine and we see an uptick. I do communicate with my colleagues across the country from the other superintendent, from the other state associations who do superintendent searches. Some of them are moving forward, some of them are pausing, some of them are having people withdraw, some of them are just moving forward. So it really is very personal, and it's just a, I think if we just kind of hit a little pause and talk about it in 2 weeks, we'll have a better idea of what the future may hold.
Okay. I think that's what we're doing. Because what we're talking about is sending out the announcement that we'll be seeking a superintendent. We're not moving forward anything past that. And I think that maybe we should not try about the timeline right now. We know where we're heading. We know we want a new superintendent by the summer, at least some of us do. So we're aware of that, so let's just keep moving forward. Andrea?
Can I get some confirmation on the language that would say, tentatively, the school board plans to post the formal advertisement in May with the goal to fill the position by summer 2020. Does that work for everyone?
I see Jane and Shirley. Yes, it works for me. It doesn't work for Bridget or Eric, so you got 3.
Unless maybe there's some language that we could kind of blend it a little, if they have a suggestion.
Do you have a suggestion, Eric or Bridget? Bridget?
Yeah, again, I think the announcement notifying everyone, I mean, as you said, I think when you get into that timeline, I don't know that is, I don't think that's the right path right now. I think utilizing, it is our hope or it is our intent to fill this position by, the summer of 2020, but given the fluid situation, they are evaluating it and the time, time will be addressed in very soon. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, but I think for our community's sake, actually more than anything else, putting that language in there, this is May, by this time, I don't think it's a wise decision. I still think you can put the message out there that it is this district's in hope and intent to try to seek and fill this position by the beginning of next year's school year.
which is
I
some,
would leave it at that. I would not put, I think putting all those different variables in there, again, I tell you, the community's not going to be a big supporter of this. And I think that hurts that person's ability to be successful. That's my opinion.
Eric,
So I think on one hand, we sat there and just said, well, we'll pause, we'll come back at the next meeting, reevaluate stuff. And then the next breath is, but we're going to send an announcement and say we're going to advertise in May. Those are two conflicting statements. So you're not, what you're really saying is, we're going to say that we're going to put it off and evaluate, but we're really going to advertise in May and move full speed ahead. We have an issue with our community, and that has deteriorated over the past year. And to continue with this, the community has spoken very loudly that they want us to place pause on this. It's in the editorials in the newspapers, it's letters, it's people stopping me at Publix. It's almost to a T of people wanting us to concentrate on feeding children, dealing with Corona, dealing with educating the children. And so if we're going to say we're going to pause and reevaluate it, and then on the other hand say, by the way, we're going to advertise it in May no matter what's going on, those are two conflicting statements. Again, we may be in the apex in May, maybe the pinnacle. We may not have reached the pinnacle in May. Who knows? I think the plan of that we had talked about a few moments ago of let's reassess this at the next meeting and go on from there is the correct way to do it. But the majority of the board wants to go forward. They have the majority.
well, I'm going to speak first. I have been speaking to people in the community, and I guess we travel in two different circles. Because some of the people tell me that we need to be leaders. We need to move forward as leaders because this is our responsibility, and we need to get a superintendent in here. That's what I'm being told. I hear the others too, but I also hear that. And I know that people are responding to surveys and they're doing online interviewing. I know Chuck Fowler just hired somebody, all online. He had 40 applicants, all online. Shirley.
You know, I see us going down the same rabbit hole. Rather than working together as a board to come up to consensus on this, there's articles that come out in the paper that said the board is discussing this. The board hadn't been discussing this, extending the search. There were some board members that were discussing it on social media. And we're back to, instead of working together as a board, we're pulling out our own special interest or private interest out on social media. And that is the wrong way to run a district. You know, to go out and it's very frustrating to me to go onto Facebook and I'm not on your site or anything, but sometimes my name gets mentioned and then it gets pulled in and then it's, oh, Shirley, somebody mentioned you. And I see what it was, or even the article in the Herald Tribune when it had the picture like I was out there leading a battle or something. I'm not leading a battle on rushing this through. That's not it at all. And we weren't even discussing it. The only discussion that was happening, because it's supposed to be at the board table, the only discussion that seemed to be having was the discussions that Bridget and Eric were having on social media. Now, I don't know if they were reading each other's social media or not. And I know it seemed a little bit, I think, you know, crossing the line on when some of the respondents, like there was the one gal that said, well, this is what we did on 9/11 and we should do this. And then Bridget turns around and responds all and gives her opinion on this. You know, we have got to stop doing those kinds of things. We need to work together as a board, and we need to stop making this us and them, because it shouldn't be us or them, and you shouldn't have your sides picked before you come to the board meeting. We should discuss it. We said, yes, the timeline we had isn't working, and we go, well, let's put it out there. A month later, we're going to be advertising now, and we're going to see who's coming in. We definitely don't know what's going to happen. But one thing that could happen is one of our leaders gets sick. with this COVID-19, or ends up, for whatever reason, has to shelter at home and quarantine themselves. I mean, what do we do then? I mean, we are lean on our leadership right now. You know, and when I look at what has to be done in the financial aspects of this, I mean, to me, that would have taken over time for Mitzi to begin with, to try to figure out what we're doing with this, with the money coming in, and how do we pay this, and how do we do that, and what is the legislature doing when they haven't even signed their budget yet. That alone should be taking all of her time. And when I ask her, well, what happened with the legislature and how do those bills that passed affect us? She says, well, I haven't even had a chance to look at that yet. Well, those things have to happen too. We can't just stop. We've got to continue moving forward and doing business as usual with some accommodations. We can't just stop, because we can't afford to lose another leadership position here to this illness, which is a very likely possibility. We don't know either whether there's going to be a flattening, which is starting to happen in New York, where it's flattening out. The new cases are going down, only to see a rebound effect. And then they say, oh, wait a minute, now we can't do anything, and you know, we can't open schools in August. We can't open schools, or we open them in August, then we shut them down in September. I mean, we can't continue to draw this out on what might happen. So what we're saying now is, we'll start the advertisements in May. If we don't get decent candidates in, and if candidates that would have been interested are saying, well, I can't leave my district right now, would you, you know, we can deal with that then. But to just say no one's going to apply now, I think that's a defeatist attitude. And I think we need to be working forward. We're not going to say we're not hiring any teachers. I think we're still going to be hiring teachers. Should we stop hiring teachers too? I mean, it doesn't make sense. We still have to continue moving forward. We still have to do the budget. We still have to do things that the legislature says that we as a board have to do. And one of the most important things we have to do is hire a superintendent.
Thank you, Shirley. Jane? Bill,
I just wanted to say that most of the people who will be making application to us will be doing so after their school year has been completed. And that's what we're hoping, is that we will complete our school year sometime in May. Whether we go back to school or not, we're hoping that we will. We're taking out the month of tests, so we should be able to do so. A lot of our high school students are finishing up right now, and we're hoping. There's been some very, very good results so far of our online learning. Teachers have been doing an excellent job, and my hat goes off to all those in curriculum development, Laura Kingsley, her staff, and everyone. But we cannot wait on this an indefinite amount of time, because this virus may be with us for some time. It may be with us for another 18 months until we have actually found something that we can use, a serum that we can use that will eradicate it, God willing. But I say that we look specifically at the timeline at our next board meeting. We go ahead with the notice and make plans accordingly.
Thank you, Jane. Bill?
Yes, ma'am. We are so close to reaching a consensus on every item, and I think we're only a word or two apart on the announcement. Andrea, let me call on you if you can find that word, because I think we're all saying we want to pause to the next meeting. The only differences we have are being specific when we want to post the advertisement and when we want to go ahead and close it. So is there some wording that we can agree on that? Because I really feel like we've accomplished an awful lot today. Andrea, do you have an idea that as far as some wording that we all can agree with?
Yeah, I mean, I have two choices here. One is the school board plans to fill the position before the beginning of the 2021 school year, which does not preclude advertisement in May, but it does not commit to advertisement in May. The other is some language from, and I'm sorry, I don't know who Wilson A. Pava, somebody's using somebody else's computer, I think, but somebody else proposed the school board projects that it will post in May, projects that it will post in May with the hopes of filling the position during the summer of 2020 with the goal of having the new superintendent begin for the 2021 school year. So those they're both written over here in the chat, one right above the other, and both of them get us closer. The second one's I would tweak a little bit, but I understand what they're going for.
Thank you, Shirley. Bill?
Yes, ma'am. I just like to see if we can reach consensus on this one last point, and then we'd be leaving this meeting on this subject with everybody in agreement. What about that wording? What about either of Andrea's wording?
Bridget? Shirley, I got you. Wait.
I'm sorry, I was trying to read it just because the wording, I mean, I think we're close. That was, and oh, thank you, Bill, for your calming tone, because my hope was to come to the middle as understanding we're pausing, but we don't want to prolong this forever. I couldn't be more clear. I agree with that too. I want to be cautious about how tight that then narrow some of those dates were, with the intent or hope to fill that position before the 2021 school year. So thank you for, again, focusing on that. I'm sorry it eroded that way. I thought we were pretty close to some compromising language. So I can't, unfortunately, I'm trying to pull up the chat, but if it has anything in there that is a little bit more ambiguous, but is very clear that the goal is to fill that position before the beginning of next school year, I think we've hit, I mean, that works for me.
Excellent.
There it is.
There it is on chat now.
No.
Well, this is just for you guys.
It's on Zoom.
No, it was
Can you see it?
Andrea, and yeah, Andrea had typed one thing, but the last thing she said, I don't think we can see in the chat.
Because it was sent to panelists, not just participants. Let me copy it and let me put it out. I don't know who put it in there. Here we go. There we go.
There it is. It says one new message tomorrow.
And like I said, I don't know who posted that. I don't know whose computer that is.
And the school board projects that it will post in May.
It's a little wordy. I would work it a little differently, but it's got.
Hopes.
I think it's good.
Yeah, its intent is to continue on, but we're still navigating, as we navigate this. But it's just, I thought that, I mean, the announcement's the goal to make everyone aware that we understand, we're monitoring it, this is our goal, but we're being a little fluid, and that, like I said, I don't know if intent or hope is the right one, but to have the position filled by the beginning of the school year, I don't know that it makes sense that we put in when jobs are posted and when they're not. Maybe you guys can answer that question. To me, do we need to be that specific to achieve the purpose of the announcement?
Andrea or Bill, can you answer that?
I'm open not to put it in because we really haven't decided that. We don't have to really have that in. If we say, well, we want to fill it, I would be fine with that myself.
So then we go back to the original language that I put there, which I'm going to post again so it comes back up for everyone, which is the school board plans to fill the position before the beginning of I would put 2021 school year.
Yeah.
It doesn't lock you into an advertisement. It doesn't preclude you from an advertisement. It leaves it open for both.
We're going to leave the front end. The school board projects that it will post in May.
No, it would just, the only thing that it would say is the school board plans to fill the position before the beginning of the school year. And then it would say qualifications are, and it would say master's degree required, doctorate preferred, all of those. And then it would say the formal process for applying is forthcoming. And then next week after your board meeting, whatever we might decide would be the forthcoming information.
Okay, by me. Jane, you're saying yes. Shirley? I can't hear you.
Did you mute her?
Do we need to be more specific about the school year? Because school doesn't start in August in other areas in the country. But I guess we could leave it open until the next one anyway, so that would work. But yeah, I hadn't heard what you said before, so I'm glad you've got it printed here.
Okay. Bridget, are you,
I think that, I mean, again, I'm trying to pull, I'm sorry, I'm a little quirky here, but if it's intends hope, you know, it's our hope or goal. I mean, so intends to fill it by the beginning of the school year. I think, again, yeah, I think it's broad enough. I know we're moving forward. It sends the message, but it doesn't lock us in because we do have to navigate it and adjust. So, fine with that.
okay, Eric,
I'm fine.
okay. Bill,
Yes, ma'am. I'd just like to thank the board members for coming together on all these items. I think we accomplished a great deal, and I think we have enough direction to move forward. And I think I really feel good where we are in the process. And I'd just like to thank all the board members for their suggestions. And it's very impressive to me how we've all been able to come together. Thank you all very much.
Shirley,
I have a question for Art. Since this is a thing that was coming before the board, can we make sure that the social media posts about this, because I don't know if Bridget had one, but I know that Eric posted it, at least on one that I saw, maybe more, and was getting feedback on it. If we could get those posts and what those comments were so that we can, you know, all see them or all, you know, save them for posterity. Because I think that's one thing that is happening, you know, more than once. And I know, Art, you've talked to us more than once about this. You know, something gets posted and then it doesn't get saved. You know, I went through and saved a bunch of my posts and gave them to Kathy a while ago. But I know there's this issue has been out there, and I know that we got an email from Steve Crump that there was something else that was out there. And then I said, well, what did it say? Can you send me? And he says, oh, it's deleted now. Well, so when something gets posted and a comment is made by a board member and then it's deleted, I mean, isn't that an issue of sunshine? And shouldn't those things be recorded for sunshine law purposes?
Well, the sunshine law applies when 2 or more board members are communicating. So if it's simply one board member speaking either verbally or in a written form with the public, the sunshine law is not implicated, which is why I always try to remind the board not to engage with each other on any forum, whether it's social media or otherwise. So if something's on a school board forum, I trust that it will be maintained. But if people are doing things personally off of a school board forum, I don't believe that that's the sunshine law is implicated by that, as long as there aren't 2 board members involved, and 2 board members should not be involved in such a conversation.
So it's
Shirley, wait.
fine for, well, you know, whether or not it's good board practice or not, I guess is another question. Because, you know, it just gets so frustrating when things are put out there, you know, that I think misrepresent my position when somebody replies. And then
Shirley,
like,
could we
oh, wait a
hold for a
minute, I
minute?
guess I just
Shirley?
leave that out there. I mean, so
Shirley,
that's where
could we
it
hold for a
gets to, is when there's replies from somebody who isn't the board
I
member
see you.
about something that I said or you know,
Shirley,
misrepresents something.
mute her. Eric,
And he answered your question. Do you need? Okay, guys, the other.
She still wants to talk. So.
who wants to talk?
Shirley.
Eric, I called on you.
All right. Well, I had asked that second question of Art. So, you know, how, you know, when somebody other than the board member comments and misinterprets something that you've said, is that a problem if you correct not what the board member says, but what somebody else said on a post that went on and on?
Third-party post.
I think that if 2 board members are communicating on a social media post, certainly they should not be communicating directly about any issue that could come before the board for a vote at some point. It becomes a little more difficult, which is why I'd like you all to stay off social media, but I know I lost that battle a long time ago. it becomes more difficult for me to answer if you are responding to members of the public. If you are using responses as a way, or if someone could allege you are using it as a way to communicate with other board members, then someone could make the argument that that's a sunshine violation. I'm quite sure none of you would intentionally do that, but the best way not to do that is simply not to engage in those battles on social media. I think that's the best answer I can give you at this point.
Okay. Eric?
All 5 of us use social media. All 5 of us have a Facebook account. All 5 of us post on it. But it seems time and time again that only 2 of us are not allowed to post. It seems that 3 people are allowed to post and 2 people are not, and that's wrong. And the other thing is, if somebody makes a post and you have an issue with it, then go post on your own and do your own comments. The problem comes up is when somebody posts, when I post something, and then other board members comment underneath my post. That's where we're going to get into problems. I have asked you guys multiple times, when I post something, don't comment under it. Ms. Ziegler posts something, don't comment under it. It just so happens that mine and Ms. Ziegler's posts get the most comments. I can't help that. We have no control over that it's more engaging to the people when we post. If you want to post something on your own, you guys do that all the time, and you have every right to do that. But guess what? That right rests with all 5 of us. That right does not just rest with 3 people on the board. All 5 of us have the right to give our impressions. All 5 of us are allowed to talk to the newspaper. There are plenty of articles where I'm not quoted, but Shirley may be in, or Bridget, or Jane. That's the right of the newspaper. And if that article ends up getting posted over your quotes and people don't support your position, don't look at me and Bridget for the issue. The issue is not with me and Bridget because we post our newspaper article. I think the issue is external to us. So all 5 of us are equally independently elected board members. All 5 of us are allowed to have our own independent opinions, and all 5 of us are allowed to have our own posts and comment under. The only thing I ask is that, and I think that we should all do this, is if there's a post by somebody else, don't go post underneath that person. That's what's going to get us in trouble, is if people are posting under one of my comment under one of my posts, don't come into it. If you don't like something somebody's saying, then go create a whole nother post and make sure people know your position. Stand and fall in your own position. If you have a position, state it. But to come into a board meeting and to say something derogatory about, Ms. Ziegler, about her post is inappropriate. Totally inappropriate. We're trying to get along. We're trying to get consensus. This is almost not even relevant to the moment at hand. And I hope we can just bury this issue, continue on with the meeting consensus, and stop this discussion of certain people are allowed to have these rights and other people have these rights. We are all independent. We are all elected. We all have equal rights. And I hope we can just move on with the meeting and not continue down this road. We're agreeing on a lot of things today. We have a lot of contested stuff, and I think we're working very well. And so calling out individual board members for things in social media that is not relevant to the discussion or even helpful and is actually counterproductive to the discussion at hand, I think we should all stay aware from, and we should just move forward and only talk about things that are consensus and work together.
Jane, did you want to speak? Jane.
Say for clarification that, we talk about the sunshine law, but we also talk about public information. And I've been on the short stick of the texts and so forth, but even in the sphere of wonderful social media, i.e. Facebook, you are not allowed to block an individual from one of your posts, nor are you allowed to delete anything. Am I correct, Mr. Hardy?
If you've got an official account, then I think there at least is some law that says you shouldn't block people and you shouldn't delete things if it's an official account. If it's a personal account, that could be different.
I was told on a personal account.
Yeah, I was too. I was too.
Well, when by personal, I'm talking about something that you're not discussing business, that it's something you share with your family, you share with friends, what have you. I know that many of you, or some of you at least, comment on the Herald Tribune site. That's not something that you either maintain or control, so I don't know how you could monitor that. But that's a site where you should not, or anywhere else, you should not be discussing with each other matters that come before the board.
Thank you, Art. Shirley?
I think they have the problem when someone says all 5 of us post. I think the problem comes in is when posts are put out there that try to divide the board. That's what it is. And I post pictures of my orchids. I post pictures of my granddaughter. Most of my posts, in fact, I would think all of my posts, I'll post some that they don't have to do with an issue that comes before the board. And that's where the difference is. And I think we have to be careful, as Art has said before, and I didn't say anything about Bridget's post, it was a reply all. We are not supposed to reply all when somebody is telling us how they want us to vote. And I think we have to be careful about replying all when we're talking about how we're going to vote, or when we talk to the newspaper, because there was a time we were not to talk to the newspaper about any article items that we're going to be voting on. And, so that gets to be a problem. And I would like to go back to not posting on things that we're going to be voting on. That's the difference that I'm trying to, and I'm trying to point out. It's items that you're voting on. Now, we can talk about something that's in Tallahassee and how they're going to vote, but that's not how we're voting. I mean, so it's when something is coming before the board for a vote, I think it's counterproductive to start getting into what looks like a 3-2 split, or trying to flame the flames of a 3-2 split. I think that's a disservice to the board. And I think as a board, we should be working to try to come to consensus, not trying to, keep fanning that 3-2 split, because I don't think it's productive at all.
Shirley, could we just move forward?
Yep.
Could we end this conversation and move forward? Because this is not productive anymore. Bill?
That concludes our presentation. I believe Andrea and John, was there anything else that we needed to cover?
Not from my end, Dr. Vogel. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and you can see I put it in one of the comments, I would like to give the board until the end of business tomorrow. If any board member has any adjustments or suggestions to the draft announcement, please send them to me, and my email is right there. We'll get it out through Mitzi on Thursday morning. I just wanted to make sure that that would work for the board.
It's all right by me. Yes? Shake your heads. Eric? Okay.
All right.
It's all right, Andrew.
Thank you. That's what we'll do then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. There's a lot of hard work you put into this, and Jane wants to say something. Jane?
No, she was just waving by, I think.
No.
Maybe she wanted to talk. She just waved
Forget
by.
about it.
She just waving goodbye.
I don't know. I see hands going like this.
Yeah. No, I think she's
Bill?
just waving goodbye.
Thank you. I think this has worked better than I thought. So heads up to Joe and the IT team.
Yeah.
Bridget?
Okay, so we'll leave your meeting and you all can continue
No,
your
hang on a
business.
minute. Hang on a minute.
What,
Oh, okay.
I think this would be postponed. I just want to make sure. The Citizens Committee, are we going to discuss it at the next meeting as far as timeline and vote and names and all of that? I just want to make sure.
Yes, that's a
Okay,
very good
perfect.
point. Because we don't want to select the committee too soon, because then it puts them under the sunshine law. So we'll talk about that on the timeline. So you're correct that the current timeline with the Citizens Committee is on their just disregard at this point. We'll talk about that at the next meeting.
So name selection and voting. Okay. I just wanted, so that'll be a topic at our next meeting.
Yes. I think where we left that though was all board members were going to submit names for the Citizens Committee that they'd like people to be considered to Mrs. Tompkins.
We have a list of 20 right now, Bridget.
So yeah, and again, I am moving forward to keep us positive, and this was something I noticed it. I wasn't sure. There was an email sent out that had a bunch of names on it, and as I reflected on last time, there is a candidate that's running for office on it, and each person can pick who they want. I think last time there was a discussion as well that we weren't going to do that to, again, support to maintain the integrity and see us moving forward and be positive. I don't want to, I just wanted to bring that up because I really do. I'm really impressed with what we were able to come through to today. I was very concerned. I'm glad that we were able to veer back on track and successfully get through that. I want us to continue to maintain on a positive. I think we need to for the best interest of our community and working together. And I don't want to politicize this process, despite what certain people say. So I don't know if that's something the board wants to discuss at the next meeting, but I did just see that email come through, and I'm not sure where those names came from. I haven't sent any names in yet, except one, actually. I did tell, I had one person, but that was about a month ago. So I wanted to put that out there in the spirit of positively working together, protecting the integrity of this process, that it doesn't get hostile, it doesn't get political, and that we, that it's really geared towards finding the best person. And that I just wanted to share that. And I don't know if there's any feedback or if you want to wait until the next meeting to discuss that.
Eric?
So if I can take you back 4 years ago, in June, I became a school board member elect. I won without opposition, and I wasn't allowed to be on the superintendent search committee because you guys decided for reasons that candidates, you didn't want them on there, even though I don't know if I was a candidate or not. But it was decided I was going to be on the superintendent search committee, even though I really wasn't running for office anymore. And the committee met in August, months after qualifying had ended. Yet, I just want to make sure clear. We are allowed to put up whatever 5 names a school board member wants to put up. A school board member can put whatever 5 names that they want. But to put up a candidate, just to be honest, that they put up my opponent to make the superintendent search a political process for grandstanding for politics. And this same board member just lectured us a few minutes ago, and yet they're trying to make this political. I mean, if a board member, I believe a board member has the right to put whoever they want. If they want to put my opponent on the superintendent search committee, that is their right, but that doesn't make it correct. That doesn't make it right. If they want to turn this into a political process, I guess that is their right as an independently elected school board member, like Votero, just to paraphrase. I may not agree with what you say, but I defend with my life your right to say it. So again, if a board member wants to appoint my opponent onto the superintendent search committee, I think it's without class, but that person's entitled to do it. But then for that person to sit around and chastise other people for politicizing stuff is just a little bit hypocritical.
Okay, thank you. Bill and Andrea?
We finished our
Okay.
work. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, guys.
thank you. I really appreciate it. John, we can't see you, but I know we heard from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your work. And hopefully we'll, at some point, come up with a final timeline. Thank you much.
We will. Just can't do it today.
I understand. Take care.
All righty. Thanks, John. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into our meeting now.
Mhm.
You gonna talk?
I think the next item is the
We'll go over it.
superintendent's report.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Well,
Okay.
this was yours. This one, I don't know. Go
No,
ahead.
it's a special.
No,
Okay.
you're now. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's me now. Hi, everybody. So I just kind of wanted to bring you guys up to speed. First, I wanted to apologize to Shirley when we were on the phone and we were talking about the legislative session, I misunderstood. I thought you meant all of the bills that passed that had anything to do with education. No, I haven't read them all, but like I haven't read the new standards or anything. But if it comes to the financial components of the bill, I could, the $40 per FTE in the BSA, $7.8 million in teacher salary. I can give you all of the financial components of it. So I apologize. I obviously misunderstood what your question was. And you sent me a good list of questions that we're working on. I think maybe at our next meeting, it's traditionally a workshop meeting. So if we're going to continue to hold these meetings, I don't see why we wouldn't also workshop. So we could workshop the budget as well as the superintendent search, because again, that is another component. Schools and departments are still working on their staffing. So again, it'll kind of depend on where we're at. And as Shirley mentioned, the budget has not gone yet to the governor, and I don't anticipate that happening until as late as possible. So we're still working through what we're working on. But I would like to talk about, what's been happening in the district. So first and foremost, I cannot express to the staff, including this gentleman sitting in the room helping to support us today, and everyone in IT and food service and instructionally, curriculum, I'm just telling you that I am the most blessed, grateful individual to have the staff that we have in the school district. They are, bar none, the best people in the world. I just cannot tell you who in God's name can pivot and in 7 days get 43,000 kids remote learning and being fed. I mean, come on now, that's just crazy how great these people have been. I'm just beyond impressed. And I know I'm not the only one. And my superintendent's calls, they're all talking about how impressed they are, which is great. I'm just a little biased because I think our people are just doing that much better of a job. So, but I did want to kind of share a few things with you. So Sarah sent to me the number of meals that they have prepared and sent out. Week 1, they distributed 17,604 meals, plus the backpacks from all faiths. Week 2, they distributed 28,016 meals, plus the backpacks and snacks from all faiths. And through Tuesday, so 2 days, 12,250 meals. I mean, they've served nearly 58,000 meals since school has returned to being in session. I mean, it's amazing. Her team has just done phenomenal work, and they've, are opening another site, or they've opened a site at Alta Vista. I'm not sure if it's opened yet or it's opening next week. No, I think it's open this week, right? Alta Vista. So they have Booker, Fruitville, Garden, Wilkinson, Lamarck, Northport, and Atwater, and now Alta Vista. So as most of you all know, we are going to move to weekly feedings to just reduce the number of touch points with our families. So this Thursday, students will get a week's worth of meals, and then we'll move to Fridays. And this is kind of more in line with, they'll come in and prep. They get all of their meal deliveries or their food deliveries on Thursdays. So that they're only having to really come in once a week, take the deliveries in, do the meal preps, and then do the distribution on Fridays, where every student who comes in will get 5 lunches and 5 breakfasts. So they'll receive 10 meals since we feed Monday through Friday. So that'll happen until whenever we reopen school. We are working on, they obviously have been using gloves for forever, and we are working, and hopefully we'll have in on Monday masks for them to be able to wear. They're not the N95 masks that our healthcare officials need, but they're European equivalent. So we're waiting on that delivery. In addition, we have our bus drivers, which Jason Harris emailed me while we were in this meeting. So I wanted to relay this to everyone, that as of right now, transportation has scheduled student packet home deliveries for 19 schools, totaling 553 deliveries. So, I mean, that's kind of amazing what the transportation department has done to kind of step up and help with the distribution of paper packets to our families, again, to try to reduce the number of touch points, keep our families and our kids at home instead of having to come to schools to pick up their schoolwork. So also, I have news regarding construction and facility projects. Now that our schools are basically empty, it is nice for us to be able to try to get some of this work done. And because they're empty, they're actually able to get it done a little bit faster. So facility projects like painting our schools, some of the painting that needs to be and those who are out there working while also, getting these projects completed. And then let's see, I got from Laura Kingsley this morning. We have 89% of our students, and this doesn't include charter because we don't have their numbers, but 89% of traditional students have logged into their My account since March 30th, which is how they log in to get access to any of their applications. So it's not daily attendance, but we know we have reached 89% of our students.
That's great.
Which I think is wonderful. And we know that kindergarten and first grade are being predominantly learning through paper packets. So it's hard to know exactly what that number is that aren't included. Like is that 11% differential are kindergartners and our first graders? Probably not entirely, but I mean, I feel like we've done a really great job of reaching out. We have some who, I know Englewood Elementary School had their guidance counselor, I think their homeschool liaison, I'm not sure who it was, but they all came together, and when a teacher wasn't able to reach a student, they created their own little child find group of them who, just went down to the ends of the earth, actually to the point where they were sticking business cards in doors of families to try to reach out. I have a friend who is an SRO who was trying to do the same thing. In his mind, it's kind of similar to when you call the sheriff's office for a wellness check. Are they okay? Are they doing okay? And it turned out that they had moved, phone number was different, but they found an old email address somewhere and they were able to track them down and connect. So I think it's just great, everything that's been done. These IT guys here are just out of control, and the Ray staff, they've distributed, which when I talk about distribute, they're going into the schools, they're taking a computer that currently won't work outside of the school system, they're scrubbing that computer, arranging for it to work in the student's home, and then distributing them out. So let's see, 8,515 devices have been distributed with virtually 0 complaints and great appreciation from our family. We also have received 1,000 help tickets. So when we went off of the mobile device survey for them to get their computer devices and connecting to their teachers and having them put in help desk tickets, there have been 1,000 help desk tickets that have been closed and over 600 phone calls that have come in and been returned or resolved. So I just want to thank the staff for their just outstanding efforts on everything they've been doing. And then I just wanted to share a little bit of other good stories and public input. So Mr. Olinger contacted Jack Turgeon and sent the following that he really wanted me to share with you. So I'm sharing with you because I think it's great. And it's Mr. Turgeon, I hope this email finds you staying healthy and COVID-19 free. I'm writing this email to give praise for one of your teachers, Mr. Diz. Prior to the COVID-19 school closure, Mr. Diz was consistently communicating with my wife, son, and I, giving us updates on his learning. I feel confident that this type of communication was done with all his students and their parents. When we had questions, he was quick to respond with thoughtful replies. During the early stages of the COVID-19 school uncertainty, Mr. Diz sent emails with tips on how the kids could keep their minds engaged during the extended break in learning. Not only did he give recommendations about English, but he also made mention of other core subjects such as math and science. Mr. Diz's actions show how much he cares for students and their schooling. In the current climate with budget cuts, disrespectful children, and students to teacher ratios, it's quite refreshing to see that there are teachers out there that are still committed to helping our younger generation succeed. I feel that this is the right time to recognize Mr. Diz with all the social distancing and your staff trying to make a quick and efficient transition to online teaching. It helps the soul to hear praise. So I thought that was wonderful. And then just a couple of other quick things that we were notified of. Brookside Middle School's Facebook page posted a video of the staff dancing to the song Happy to let their kids know how much they miss them. It's gotten a large and positive response. And Brookside Cares is part of their IB caring and service part of their school. And they've partnered with Chick-fil-A at Pelican Plaza and their PTSO and set up a GoFundMe account to provide appreciation lunches to local healthcare professionals. So their goal was $1,500. They currently have $1,625. So they met and exceeded their goal. And they're, providing lunches to Intercoastal Medical and Sarasota Manatee Hospital. I mean, come on, these guys are amazing. And then Ryan Chase sent an email. I thought this was great at Sarasota High School, and it was, for employee morale. He hosted a virtual family picnic for his teachers and their families. And in the picnic, they actually had a virtual scavenger hunt, and they played the emoji game. As long as there was a particular emoji they didn't include, I guess that was a good thing. So, I mean, I thought that was awesome. And then Melanie Ritter sent to Dr. Kingsley an entire week in review at Triad, which is amazing, right? All of the kudos go to the staff. They all are providing ways for the students to contact them, providing quotes. I mean, it was just wonderful. But I will tell you, I think the thing that got me the most was, hopefully, can you zoom in on this, Jamal? I really want to show this particular picture. So it's a post on Facebook from a parent. Let me see that. I don't know if you can see it. But it's a teacher who's standing at a window pane on the other side of a student playing tic-tac-toe. So she drove to the student's house and played tic-tac-toe. It says, feeling very lucky that my children have the best teachers you could hope for. I'm not going to mention the child's name. Was so happy that his teacher made a special trip to his house to drop off materials and play a quick game of tic-tac-toe through the window. It's the little things that mean so much. So with that, I am done with the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Missy. Bridget?
Thank you for sharing. My first kudos to Mitzi. I have to just commend you and applaud you. I know we've talked about this. I know you're working incredibly long hours. No one could have predicted this. There is absolutely no roadmap. And I know there was a lot, it was a team effort. There was everyone, all hands on deck, but I recognize you didn't volunteer. You may volunteer. This is not what you initially thought you would be doing, but I'm very grateful that you are in that position. I think you've done a really great job. I think the stories are just remarkable, and I really appreciate you taking the time to read them. As I've talked to other people, and I'm sure everyone else has too, it's just, this is an extraordinary time. I can promise you, with my kids over there and working from home, and it's super tough. And I am so impressed with our teachers and the way and their flexibility and their messaging and going above and beyond to make sure our families are supported and work through this. And so I could not actually capture how grateful I am, but I am incredibly appreciative to all of the work that all of you have put in and continue to navigate this never, a completely unprecedented and unpredictable space. But I really do appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you to your whole team. I really appreciate it.
They are awesome.
Shirley?
I agree. I'd like to thank Mitzi and the team, for pulling this together. I know when, the rest of us were on spring break, they were here working, probably 18 hours a day trying to get things through. And I know they've done some, our schools have done some interesting things. The daddy-daughter dance at Flippy Shores went ahead, but they did it virtually. And so these kids got together and they were dancing and they were showing each other what they were doing and making their moves, and the dads dressed up. It looked really cute. But I know we've got, a lot of employees out there, concerned. We had decided we were paying them during the one point and then not another. And I think we probably need to look at that again, because I know that the governor has said that if people are over 65 and they have certain conditions, they shouldn't be working. And, whether, we pay them or they on leave or we do furloughs, I think that's a discussion that we probably ought to have at some point. We don't know yet when we're going to be going back, and I don't know, and I'd like to sit down and talk with you, Mitzi, on how we're going to handle that. But I'm also hearing from employers and parents and teachers too, that when there's more than one child in the home, it gets kind of difficult to get all of the kids around and follow them all up. So some of our probably most stressed parents out there that may have lost their jobs and now they've got more than one child that they have to try to get food for, and also get them in the car, and then also get them to their homework assignments. It's just a lot. And I think we need to keep in mind that some of these parents, we're not all two-parent families with 2 or 3 kids. There's a lot of them with several children out there and single parents, and it's rough for some of these parents. And I know that we're reaching out to some of them, but some of them don't know where to call. I know that the thing about the food, they were saying there was problems up in the north end of town. I'm glad to hear we're opening up Alta Vista, but I've been referring people to call, is it 211 that they call? And maybe there should be some more information on the site, or there's these parents don't know how to even get to the computer, I suppose. I'm not sure, or they're not going there for some of the answers. And then, when are they going to be making the decisions on whether we're repeating grades or not? And I know a lot of this is still up in the air, but maybe you can shed some light on when we might be able to start understanding those things, or perhaps at another meeting, we'll be able to have a workshop and discuss those things.
Thank you, Shirley.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can talk about them at any point in time. I will tell you that teachers have been trained to follow the guidance of the commissioner. They are to show compassion and grace with their students. There is no expectation that I am aware of that students need to spend any more than 3 hours on their computer doing schoolwork in a day, because we were trying to be sensitive to the fact that there are multi-children family out there. Again, if there's any particular issues, we encourage the families to work with their teachers. That's their first resource to work with. And the teachers can then put them in touch with those individuals. I mean, we have social workers and guidance counselors and school psychologists at the ready to help and support our kids. So as long as the teachers are aware, and again, we have some we haven't quite reached yet, and we're still working on those, and that, we'll do everything in our power to help support those kids in their learning environment. Yeah.
Jane?
I was going to say that I've had some really good feedback from some teachers as well, and my hat goes out to our wonderful staff. Mitzi, great job on your part, and all of the leaders in our district have done such a remarkable job. I wasn't surprised. I always think that we're the best anyway, but I had a text from a teacher at Riverview who said it's really been special for her to reach out one-on-one with texts and emails to her students, and that they seem to like it, and she feels that she's very grateful for this form of instruction at this time of the year. I've had high school students who are working on reports. I have a graduating senior in my family, so he's working on some things at Riverview. I've had grandmothers and great-grandmothers who have sat and observed their children on online learning and have really been remarkable, felt that the teachers were just remarkable. One teacher, Mrs. Hall, 4th grade at Tuttle, especially has done a great job. Mayhaven has done, well, all the schools, but I had calls from various different mothers and grandmothers about some of the wonderful work that we were doing and how much they feel that they owe their teachers and instructors an awful lot. And I think maybe one of the great benefits from this whole horrible experience will be that teachers are really respected more, because I think parents are seeing with 2 and 3, and I think probably Eric and Bridget with their families can say that it's really difficult working with multiple children in one family, but they're singing the praises of our teachers, and I love hearing that.
Eric,
It's incredible how we have managed to reinvent ourselves in such a short period of time, and that's a testament to Mitzi and her leadership. Everybody had to get retooled. Every single person is doing a different job, a different way, in a different manner than they were doing before, and executing on that is huge. There's still some kinks that need to be worked out. Somebody mentioned furlough earlier. I would be adamantly, I'd be very, very negatively towards furloughing anybody. This is the wrong time to be doing that. School year's almost over. I would be hard pressed to support furloughing anybody. The government's trying to make sure that people get their paychecks, and having to go to Publix and buy food and have some sense of stability, even though they parents may be sitting at home with their children, but they're still working. I mean, it's a lot to handle. So it's Mitzi, my hat's off to you and to your entire team, the manner in which you've been able to reinvent yourself. And just so it doesn't go without saying, I would love for us, we had talked about it after the hurricane, and we never quite did it, but I sincerely hope after this crisis pass that we have a serious debrief. We talk about some lessons learned. I mean, I would like to talk about in the future, do we require, instead of 1 virtual class before you graduate, that we start requiring, 4, 5, 6 virtual classes before you graduate? This is how people learn in the future. This is how people are learning now. People go to webinars, people are going, flying off and going to conferences becomes more and more antiquated, and more meetings and training. And so if there's any silver lining in this terrible crisis, it's that it's teaching our students to be able to adapt to distance learning, so that when they get out, and I think any job, no matter what the skill level, there's training involved that's virtual in nature, and giving this opportunity for our children and our students to be exposed to this type of educational method, and for them to be acclimated to it, is going to make them better corporate citizens in the future. And I think this is something that we should debrief and talk about, and how do we integrate this process into our curriculum going forward? Because I don't think that it's a new normal. I don't think that even after this crisis passed, we should go back to the way that things were before. I think that this has transformed our district, and I seriously hope after this that we have a debrief, lessons learned, and seeing how this ability to adapt can be used in a positive manner for our school district and our students, not just now, but in the future.
thank you. Shirley? Shirley? Wait a minute. Yes, probably is. Don't touch anything.
Will it not work because she has this thing? She has one of these things.
Okay, I guess they changed how they do that. I'm sorry. I wanted to clarify what I meant by furloughs. I understand that some employees that were over 65 or were sick or had to stay home with kids couldn't come in and were told they needed to take leave. And I'm not so sure if that follows with what the governor meant or what Congress meant, because if they have to take medical leave, I think we ought to look at maybe giving them furlough instead so that they can qualify for that $600 that a week that is in the CARES Act. I don't know how that would affect us, and and I know that needs to be looked at in more than one way. But as regards where the teachers are this week, I read something from another superintendent that said, when this is all said and done, and when these kids are looking back on this year of COVID-19, the kids won't remember the lessons so much that their teachers taught them this week, but they'll remember how their teachers made them feel. And I think that's important. And that was a message that was sent out to the teachers, that we need to be thinking of the emotional needs of these kids and show compassion to the families. I know that Laura sent that out to the principals sent it to the teachers, and the teachers are sending that down to the students. And I think that's important, that we're not just looking at their educational needs, but we're reaching out to them for their emotional needs, and we're trying to make them feel happy and working that this is a positive thing and it will go on. And hopefully these kids will think back on this time and have many, many happy memories. And I know we're building those right now.
Bridget?
Yeah, no, I wanted to add to that point, and I know I've had this conversation. I know I'm living it too. But it's not, the academics are going on, and we're still engaging our children. But there is a real mental strain because of all of us are in this unique situation, and the students don't have their peer-to-peer contact. I know a lot of the elementary schools did parades, which was so cool. But one thing that I also think is really important, because our staff are also, many of them have little children who are also, so they're also teaching and have to make sure their kiddos are following along with their academics, but that we have employee assistance programs. And I know that there was an email sent out about that, and I just want to make sure people take advantage of that because it's there, and it can absolutely help. So I just wanted to, another kudos to our team for making sure that information gets out there so our staff gets the support that they need to.
Thank you.
Great reminder, Bridget. We do have an EAP program. We also now have a zero copay on our teledoc program for our staff. So just wanted to relay that out there, which is great. And then with regard to the furloughs, the one time we discussed potentially having to use leave was prior to when everything kind of ramped up. So it was prior to the extended spring break. So the thought was you were gone for a week, but then you maybe have to be out for 2 weeks. So, but nobody's used any leave and nobody is not getting paid. I mean, our funding is determined based upon surveys on counts made in October and February, and they're done. So we have received those funds, or we will be receiving those funds. So from a financial perspective for the school year, there isn't any intention to not pay our employees.
Eric?
I don't remember, was the CARE 1 or CARE 2 Act? I'm just going to call it the Family Medical Leave Act. Mitzi, do you know?
Yeah, it's the Family First Coronavirus
Fund.
FFCRA.
With the tax credit. Are we eligible to take advantage of those tax credits? Were you able to ever determine that?
I have staff researching it because, I mean, it seems interesting that it's for employers under 500 so that they can take advantage of the tax break and governmental entities, but yet there's no positive position for a governmental entity. There has to be something. So I have
because we do pay payroll tax, correct?
Correct. And my hope was that the dollar for dollar reduction was off of the salaries I paid for the employees who took the 10 days at either 100 or 2/3, or those who were taking advantage of the 10-week at 2/3, that I get to take a dollar for dollar on their wages paid through those taxes. But we do pay payroll taxes. We do not get a payroll tax credit, so I don't get to not pay like the Social Security, Medicare that may be available to others, but we're still working through that piece of it. We're not sure, but my hope is that we get some kind of tax relief in some way, shape, or form. So I've got two.
Hopefully it's a moot point and that we don't need to use it, but it'd be interesting to know if it applies.
Yeah, there's only been one currently, and that's because, and that particular individual was told to stay home. So they qualified for one of the 1, 2, 3 out of the 6 qualified.
If we have to tell all the school board members over 65, they got to stay home.
Yes, except for to perform essential functions. So
And
I'm
this is an
teasing.
essential function,
So.
Mr. Robinson. This is an essential function.
I was kidding.
I know you are. But you have more problems than I do.
Oh. Okay, let's move
I am
on.
not in good health. I agree. I'm not in good health.
Moving on.
Okay,
Is there anything?
straight right through. I see something. Shirley, did you put something up there? Okay. All right, and next item on our agenda is the hearing of citizens. And we do have some, they're not really questions, they're recommendations, or I don't know what to say to them. One is about guns education that we should be, shall I use their names?
Well, there were four public comments that came in yesterday or today, I guess, regarding a request for the board to adopt a resolution regarding, I believe it was education about guns in the household. You all have received a copy of it. It will be entered into the public record as a component piece. And one additional comment regarding hiring of staff and an article that was attached. So I believe we'll enter those into the record as part of the minutes, and we should be good from there.
They're not really questions, so.
Yeah, it was just the public's
Yes.
comments. Correct.
Okay. Are there any corrections or additions to the consent agenda?
So I didn't know if it's additions or corrections to the agenda or the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, there was an additional personnel report that came out after the agenda was published. And then as far as new business, there is a budget amendment that's on new business. And it was basically slip sheeted from the document that was previously attached because the old document had a date of March 24th, because that's when it was originally going to be acted upon. And it now has a new date of April 7th. So those are the only
Just to
changes.
change the date, okay.
Yeah, it's just a date change on that
I
document.
move for approval of the consent agenda as amended.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I guess we'll vote. Let's go. Jane? Let's vote
Aye.
this way.
Aye.
Shirley?
Yes, yes.
Eric?
Yes, ma'am.
Bridget?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Passes 5-0.
Yeah.
Okay. No items pulled for comment, so we're into new business. Item number 36. Shirley?
Yeah, I unmute them all.
Could I have a motion on number 36? Yes, Shirley.
I move the approval of budget amendments to the general fund special revenue as presented.
Second,
Okay.
from Goodwin.
Any discussion?
Well, could we have a brief explanation of what they were, since the public is watching and they would probably be interested to know what we're doing?
Well, the predominant changes for the budget amendment are the main change is the incorporation of the salary settlement. So of course, when we go to settle a contract agreement, we can give you what the total cost will be to the district. But to know what the individual costs by individual funds are is, it takes us to the implementation component. So that was the predominant change that's included in this amendment. And then there is an adjustment downward on our Medicare revenues because ACA had changed some percentages on us. But that's pretty much it. It's, there's some changes related to the Pine View project and the.
There's my goddaughter.
Oh my goodness gracious, what a cutie
Hi,
patootie.
Fallon.
Oh my goodness, look at her.
Hi, Fallon.
Just way too happy. So I mean, that's predominantly the changes that are being incorporated into this particular budget amendment.
Any further discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Eric?
I want the record to reflect that I love my goddaughter, Fallon. I just want that on the record. I love you, Fallon.
Sorry, we made it for a long time, but
Yeah,
sorry.
you did great. It's been a long meeting.
Okay. Jane, we have to vote on this now. Jane?
Yes, I.
Shirley?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes, ma'am.
Bridget?
Sorry, yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the vote is 5-0. Item number 37. That's
I
the school
move that the school board approve the contract between Catapult Learning and the school board as presented.
I have a second.
Eric?
Second.
Hold on, don't support this.
Okay, on the discussion? No discussion? Okay. Then may I have a vote?
No, I'm sorry. Can you just clarify what the item is?
So it's a contract to provide professional development workshop for a private school under the Title II grant. We have to provide equal access to private schools as a component of obtaining those grant funds. So this is their proportionate share that they're entitled to.
Anything else?
Totally.
Okay, so please vote. Jane,
I.
Shirley,
Aye.
Eric,
No, ma'am.
Bridget,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, because this is just pass-through money
Pretty much.
in order for us to get the other
To
part.
discriminate against LGBTQ.
4-1. Sorry.
Number 38,
I move for approval of the school board policy 2020-1 emergency policy for board meetings as presented.
I second.
okay, any discussion?
What is the effect of this, and do we have to advertise, or we can just put it out there, correct?
This is an emergency policy. Therefore, you do not have to advertise it. It can be in place for no more than 90 days.
And could we get an explanation of what not for us, but for the public to know what this policy would do?
This is a policy which allows you to conduct board meetings in conformity with the governor's executive order saying that things can be done virtually, that the physical forum requirement has been waived. In other words, it's what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
Okay. No further comments? You say, Jane, let's vote. Jane,
I.
Shirley,
Aye.
Bridget, I got your figure.
Aye, yes.
Eric?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the chair votes yes, a 5-0 vote. Okay, item number 37.
39.
39.
39.
I make a motion to approval of the novel coronavirus disease 2019, more commonly called COVID-19 resolution.
This is the one right here. Is there a second?
What?
Let's have
Second, I'm sorry.
discussion.
I'm sorry, second.
Okay. Is there discussion on this item?
As for the prior one, I'd like to know what the effect this has and what it is.
This is a resolution that would delegate certain authority of the board to the superintendent during the period of emergency, such as the right to submit grants, sign contracts, etc. This was developed in the aftermath of the commissioner's edict that board meetings would not occur through June 30th save for emergency purposes. And it's still out there for the board to consider, although it's my understanding that the board is going to be meeting on a more regular basis now.
Well,
I'd
that's
like,
my
I'd
question.
like to speak.
Okay,
Speaking.
go ahead, Jane.
Well, I will not be supporting this because I do not find it necessary. Yes, it was an edict. It was developed early, and I feel that, you know, we are all going to be working together, and this should not be necessary.
I agree, because I don't want to turn everything over. I mean, I would like to be able to continue to have meetings where we get together and talk about what the situation is, because I think it's not only good for us, but I think it's also good for the public. So I think we can continue to have meetings, because that's one thing I don't want to see, is that we don't have meetings. I think we've seen what it's like on Zoom. I think we can all be comfortable doing it at home, or we could even do like many boards are doing and change the way they configure their board meeting chambers, so that they can have the meetings and we can have it online and on the television, so that everyone can see that.
Eric?
We can discuss that later too.
I agree with Shirley Brown that it's worth discussing having in the board chambers. But as far as granting Mitzi, could you turn on your volume, please? I'm getting feedback, sorry. It's very disconcerting. So I think Mitzi we just talked about all the great things she's doing, but one of the things that she has to do is she has to adapt. She's having to make 100 different decisions every day. And we need to be able to give her the flexibility and authority to be able to make those decisions every day. Because if we end up being one of the few government entities in the entire country, or possibly the entire world, not to give their chief executive officer these type of emergency authority, what's going to happen is the issues that cause her to make those 100 decisions are still going to occur. And what's going to happen is the mere fact that she's not able to turn on a dime and adapt, it's going to cause the problem to have its own decision. And it's probably not going to be a positive one. Taking Mitzi's ability to make decisions in this time of crisis, taking her ability to adapt and function, and to have to say, you're gonna have to put that on agenda, you're gonna have to put that in front of the board. By the time she gets through all that, the problem would have magnified itself. She would have not been able to take care of it. And so I trust Mitzi. I know Mitzi will do a great job. As long as Mitzi comes back to the board, which this resolution says, tells us what she's done. And, you know, the board has the ability, if Mitzi is doing stuff and the board, for whatever reason, doesn't agree with it, we can, you know, go forward from there. But you got to remember, when we make decisions at the board, it's very sanitized, very antiseptic, as so to speak, when it gets to us. When Mitzi's making decisions, it's down and dirty. She doesn't have all the information when it's time for her to make a decision, and so she has to sit there and weigh the pros and cons and make a decision. She doesn't have the ability to say somebody, now tell me how this is going to affect she doesn't have that ability. She's got to make decisions. Okay, people don't have internet, then let's print off the paper. Let's do the 75,000. Let's reassign. I know this is our job duties. We're going to reassign bus drivers and have them delivery. We're going to have bus drivers handing out laptops. She's got to have the ability to be able to make those decisions day in and day out, moment to moment, hour to hour. And taking that ability from her, I personally, I don't think that we need to meet more in this crisis. I think we need to allow staff to adapt and change and do their job. We just said, look what she's done in the past month. And look how she's been able to retool the entire district into a completely different methodology in how she delivers things from food, how she delivers curriculum, how she delivers instruction. She's become an expert on how where internet is and how things are who has easements on what roads and the states of Northport. So I trust Mitzi, and I think that we need to make sure that she has all the authority she has. Thank you.
Bridget? You have to wait.
Yeah. So a couple different things. These are in place when we're under a state of emergency for that flexibility, because there are so many twists and turns that, I mean, if you think about what has transpired in the last 30 days, it was unfathomable. And that's why these options are there, is so that the CEOs can adapt quickly and make those decisions. I know that initially this conversation came up when there was the provision that school boards would not meet until June 30th. Now it seems that we can. I do think it's important we stay as front and center to the public, so they can see continuity of government. But that being said, we are in uncertain times, and you can't predict certain things that need to be done. And there is an amount of flexibility that I believe this allows for, which is very necessary when there are urgent decisions that need to be made. I want our superintendent and staff to be able to respond accordingly. At the same time, when this discussion came up, there's a lot more responsibility on your shoulders, but I have the full faith that it would be executed in the right way and won't be abused. But again, this is in place for a reason. A multitude of government entities execute this. I am a huge believer of oversight and transparency, but I also believe in extraordinary times, there needs to be some ability for her to respond quickly. So I'm supporting it. I believe that it is while they're here. If this is an emergency, I don't know what is, but I have no doubt that it will be utilized in the appropriate manner.
When this initially came out, I agreed with you, but now I don't. I'm not going to be supporting this resolution, because I don't want to abdicate my responsibility as a board member. I think Mitzi's been doing fine. She hasn't come to us for anything. So there's no reason for this resolution, as far as I'm concerned. Shirley.
Well, I agree. You have to be unmuted by the host. I am, okay. I agree. We had this when we couldn't have the board meetings, but we can have the board meetings. And Mitzi has the full power to operate the school district and make those districts on a day-by-day basis. She can still do that, because what this was signing contracts and signing grants. And I think that will keep us coming back to the board, because I want to make sure that the board continues to meet. And I don't know that other school districts have done this. I mean, they were thinking about it. They pulled them. They're having their meetings. The superintendent doesn't need to run everything. She can operate the school districts, but to have the contract signed and those things, the board does that. And I don't like that it's become an issue whether we support Mitzi or not, because that's not it at all. I support Mitzi. Mitzi can operate the school district, but I want to have board meetings. I don't think she needs to do everything all by herself. I think the school board ought to approve the contracts like we always do.
Well, see, I agree, because the superintendent runs the district and the board members set policy. And as long as we remember that, so there's no reason why Mitzi can't continue to run the district as she has been. So any further discussion? Okay, Shirley. Shirley.
I'd like to ask Mitzi what she might think might come up or had come up or something that her hands were tied that she couldn't do, that she feels that this is needed, or does she feel it's needed still? If we're going to be meeting.
I think in the beginning it was with regard to not having another meeting technically, unless it was an emergency. I think the only thing that I could see is, right now I have a $50,000 limit on authority for a contract. So if it's anything more than $50,000, it has to be on a school board meeting and then be approved before we could enter into it. And, you know, given some of the technology things that have been occurring, some of the protections we're wanting to make sure we're putting in place in order to protect our students, those kind of things can get kind of expensive. So whether that is a contract that's going to come up in a week or it's going to come up and fit on a board agenda, because again, if I don't have it today, I know they're talking about it, I don't have it today. If I don't have it by Friday, I think it is, then it'll have to wait until May before it can come before the board. That's the only kind of a situation that I can quickly in my mind.
We're meeting the end of,
Correct, but that agenda closes tomorrow at 3:30.
We
So,
have emergency meetings
yes,
now.
on Zoom, it's no problem.
okay.
I'm sorry, that's that, but again, that is the purpose. It's ironic because I find myself constantly our job is oversight, and I'm certainly a big believer in the transparency, but in state of emergencies, things change rapidly, and we have a leader, Mitzi, who needs to be able to respond to that. And they're not business as usual items. That's why this occurs. The county commission has the same thing. I mean, if you look at government entities across this nation, all have enacted these abilities so that they can respond in the necessary manner, and they're not predictable. So, and to say, and I probably have known as that when I was chair, called the most emergency meetings ever. So I'm not opposed to emergency meetings, but I don't want to tie our staff's time up unnecessarily when they need to. And I think she made a great point. If there's something with technology, if God forbid things take a turn worse than they already are, and I hope that's not the case, and we need to protect our staff or our students in whatever way, and contracts need to be let for, you know, PPE, then I don't want that to be held up by saying we need to call an emergency meeting, because this action right now is allowing for that. And again, I have full faith she won't abuse it. Like I said, it puts more responsibility on her shoulders. It's not the direction of the board, but that is not a concern of mine. Again, these are highly unusual times, and that's why actions like this take place, to allow for that quick response and flexibility.
Shirley?
Well, I would have more comfort if, you know, I had some reassurance that, you know, anything that she is signing or giving, that she gives us notice before anything happens, you know, so that in fact, you know, there would be time for us to call an emergency meeting to say, no, don't do that. So that's what I'd like, is just have some comfort level that we are told about any contracts that are signed as soon as possible before they're signed, so that we can have some input, some feedback on it. I mean, if I get that kind of assurance, I would feel better, but I also want to have assurance that we are going to be meeting, because I saw one list that was showing us that we were meeting, almost every week. I mean, that's what I want to see. When are we going to be meeting, and how? You know,
Well,
give me some answers on that, and
Shirley,
I might be more comfortable.
that list, Shirley, was generated by Jamil, and he only did that just to get us up and running with those are not dates that
They're not board
they're
meetings.
not board meeting dates.
Right. So are we going to be going to our regular board meetings? Are we going to be having a workshop? You know, and will Mitzi, you know, assure me that before she signs anything under this order that I will be notified, or we will all be notified beforehand? That it's a question I guess I'm asking Mitzi.
So, I mean, here's my thinking, is that I wouldn't sign anything unless it was something that had to be done. So if it's a contract to do tutoring services in the 2020-2021 school year, I'm not going to sign that. That is something that can come before the board as part of your normal course of business. If it's a grant application, that I have to get in tomorrow in order for me to get funds to respond to coronavirus or to provide meals for our kids, I like to have that flexibility. But if it is the Title I grant that's due supposedly May 1st, it'll be on a board agenda for you to act on, not for me to take action on. personnel actions, I've pretty much told staff that I don't really know, unless it's a truly vital position, that we need to be hiring anybody right now. We have lots of staff who are looking for things to do. So, short of it being a teacher in front of a kid, I'm not really sure that there's a whole lot of need to hire another custodian or whatever it is. So, but those actions will come before you. I don't have any need to do anything with those. I think the intent of this was if there was a grant that would provide the district funding, but the application was due in 48 hours, and I would have to then call an emergency meeting to get it all acted on, or if it was a contract to get some kind of software or security software that we could implement out to every district computer through, some, I don't know, what do you call it? Where, you push it out to all the machines, whatever it is.
The IT budget though, because you have authority to spend X amount of money.
Nothing over $50,000 do I have authority to approve. So if this is $120,000 spend, I have to take it to the board. So those are the only kind of things I would say. I could, if something like that occurs, I would let you know, obviously, but normal business items will stay on the board. And I don't anticipate your meetings changing it. From the gist of what I've heard from everyone, you want to keep business as usual, show the public that things are operating and we're open for business, things are working just fine. I'm fine with that. I think it was from Art's perspective, just to allow a little more fluidity on the part of the superintendent to make sure we could get what we had to get done, I think.
That's right. And it was designed at a time when we didn't know we were going to continue our regular board meeting schedule.
Bridget?
I can't tell if you guys can see me. So again, I think I'm going to use the county as an example. They still are meeting, but those authorities have been given. What as a compromise, and I agree with you, Shirley, I think I want the flexibility and I have faith that she would let us know, and I know that's not the question here. What if instead we increase the authority to X? So therefore it's not a unlimited amount, and then if it were to exceed that, I'm just trying to think of a compromising scenario of what maybe would provide more comfort. Again, I really want to make sure she has the ability to respond in an urgent situation, and I think these are highly it's unusual, but we can't always predict what that is. So I don't know, Mitzi, if you would even be able to quantify variable things that could come up with it, whether it be IT or PPE or what have you.
Bridget, I don't think I need any compromise language. What I needed was some comfort language, assurances from Mitzi that she would be giving the information to us, and that really this probably may never come into play because we are going to be having the meetings. I wanted that kind of reassurance from her that we are still going to be meeting, that normal business operations are still going to be being put on the board agenda, and that we will be informed of any contracts or anything that she does sign in the interim. And she's given me that assurance, and I don't need compromise language. I'm all right with this now.
Jane?
Too many people cooking in the kitchen. She's waiting on you now.
You have to push your own buttons now. Jane, you have to push your own buttons.
God, we're beating this one to death.
You're on.
You're on, Jane.
You're on,
I'm
Jane.
ready to vote. Aren't we ready to vote? We have
Yep.
beaten this to death. Are we ready to vote? I vote no.
Okay. Shirley?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Bridget?
Yes.
And the chair votes no. So it's 3-2 in favor of
Another
the resolution.
3-2 vote. There you go.
The other way. Okay, that's the end of that one. Any announcements? I don't
I'd like to comment on the resolution about the guns. Jane's over there waving. I don't know that we can actually do a resolution now, but I think what they brought up in that remark, could you turn the volume down on yours, Eric? what they brought up I think is important, that these kids have all this time on their hands now, and parents need to be reminded to make sure any guns in the home are locked away, or any weapons for that matter. Because especially this kind of, people aren't used to being so close together for so long a time. And I surely don't think it hurts to remind parents or guardians or anybody else in a home to make sure that your guns are locked away, so that kids can't get their hands on them at this time when they're probably getting a little antsy and trying to look in all corners as it is.
Okay, Jane, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to say that I touched base with our director of Schoolhouse Link, which is the homeless education component of the district, and that they had given out 125 computers and had not found all of the kids and families yet. But Ellen McLaughlin is working on that diligently. I also wanted to mention that I think Mr. Robinson has stepped down from the Fair Board, and I am willing to go on that board if that's amenable with the board.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that. Okay, Jane, I guess you have a new.
Yeah, ask Eric and Bridget for this. No?
Eric?
Yeah, a couple of things. I've been asked by a variety of people who are looking to donate money, what types of nonprofits have been doing the most support for the school district. So if Mitzi, if you can, get that out to us so that people know. I told them All Faith Food Bank, but I didn't know if there were other nonprofits that are doing a good job in supplementing some of the work we're doing. If we can get that information out so people know, where they can provide assistance.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think All Faiths is by far our biggest partner right now, but we have, obviously our foundations are.
I was actually contacted by one of our foundations. That was.
No, I know, because they're standing at the ready to help and support us. So,
Right,
so yeah.
And then the other thing was, I know I voted for the to give you the emergency authority, but I'd also like, if people are temporarily assigned to new job, temporarily promoted to a job that's, say, director or above, if we can be notified of that, I'd appreciate that.
Okay. I don't believe there are any that haven't come before you as part of the.
I didn't think that there was. I'm just saying,
Oh, okay.
moving forward.
Okay.
I didn't think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I
All right.
don't have
Those
any
only two
intention of
items.
doing that, but.
Thank you.
Okay, Bridget, did you have something?
Yeah, sorry if you can hear background noise here, sorry. Very quick, and I don't want to belabor this, I already said it to Joe and Mitzi, and it's about future meetings, trying to figure out there's a way we can live stream our virtual meetings, and I know that's being looked into. I just wanted to address it, but because I know Mrs. Brown had sent an email, but also I know people in the public, and I know I certainly asked, so I just wanted to address it publicly that it is being looked into, but for future meetings, obviously we didn't have the time for the logistics, but just wanted to address that. And that's it. So thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Shirley?
To follow up on what Eric said, I know when I get my $1,200, I'm not losing any salary, and I've already given some to Feeding America and to our food bank at our church, but I'm going to be giving the rest of it to Season of Sharing because, they're an umbrella organization that looks at some of these things. So we've got a lot of places in the community that we can do it, and I'm sure they'll probably contact us too. But I think Season of Sharing is an umbrella organization for the community, as is United Way and in the food bank.
Okay. Any further comments? I don't have a gavel. We're adjourned.
Sorry, I apologize. So I just want to let everybody know, so your next board meeting, we'll do a workshop on the 21st and a board meeting on the 21st. We'd like to do them virtually if you guys are good with staying home. But we will make sure that we've worked on the technology component of it to make sure that we can live stream it. So whether we're in the board chambers, or we're doing it in the same format, but it will be broadcast live. And this meeting will be available on demand within an hour. There we are. So just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Caroline, just one quick thing. If there's some way that we can interface our Nexus system for our agenda and our voting, which is online, with this system, I'd like us to try to do that as well before the next meeting.
Maybe we can do that. Okay, thank you. Stay safe. Stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe.